那段文字之
OK
后您就可以出我们的第一位 keynote 演讲嘉宾，就是杨老师。
好，我这样我退一下，我再进一下。
没问题。
好，我退一下，你一会儿可以帮我再设一下嘉宾。好，稍等哈，我退一下。
好的，没问题。拜拜，一会儿见。
这样是不是好一点？按不按？好像听不到你说话声音，你好像没看。
可以，我开了。
OK
我觉得有一点暗，但是很美。
稍等，那我再搞个灯，我看一下。
暗归暗，美还是美的。
我看一下，我确认一下哈，就是对于对于老师的介绍，等一下，我先去看一下第一位杨老师，杨老师的介绍，我确认一下，我现在在看你之前的主持稿 PDF， 这个没问题吧？
没问题。
等一下，
杨老师也
看一下，
在那个会议室完之后，杨老师是清华美院的副院长
好，清华美术学院副院长杨东江，
对，他的演讲题目是这样，之后一会儿，就是杨老师有30分钟的演讲时间，结束了以后，您可以跟杨老师进行简单的一个对谈那紧接着就会到了 panel 单元那第一位演讲嘉宾就是傅老师。
那杨老师讲完以后需要跟他问答吗？因为我看你这上面写的是。
你可以，就是可以随机应变，都没问题。
博学求先，面对未来的艺术和设计，就是这个名字，这个的英文名现在是有定吗？就博学这个。
我发过来了，我再给您发一下。这样，就是我觉得大的问题，我发到微信了。
Education for Innovation, the Art and Design Education Orienting the Future。妈呀，好，好，挺长是吧？没事儿，没问题。反正中国观众主要听的也是那个。
对的，我们的会议会在那个就是有同传会传播出去，所以你说的是英文的同时，其实中国的观众会听到同传翻译成的是中文。那么杨院长他可能一会儿发音也是用中文来讲，那你们的对答环节就以杨老师的语言来为主就可以了。就是他用中文，你就也配合用中文跟他来进行对答就可以。
那一会儿快开始了，那就一会儿先请你这边来介绍我，对吧？然后我简单说2句，就是跟这个未来教育这个板块相关的一些事情。
对的，好像有一段话我已经发到那个 PDF 里面了。
有一段话是这个吗？就是未来教育对更开放、更包容这一段，对吗？这个 Futures Design Education with Expectation of a More Open Inclusive， 这个是吧？好嘞，行，好，我再加点别的哈，我稍微就随便聊两句。
好，
在培养，
好。那就这样，就是一会儿就准备是开机状态。那我们的画面就可能是大会的这个海报。那么它会有我们的群中有非常多的转播的平台，他们就以这样的一个转播方式给先转出去。 后我们准时在7点钟进行开播，好吗？
好 ，OK， 那我就先这样了，别调灯。
OK，
好，
还有任何问题的话，你可以在微信中随时呼唤我，或者是
行
朱琳。
那我视频要开着吗？现在还是关了？等
可以开，
你讲完
没问题。都可以。
行
，OK， 一会儿见。
OK， 好，谢谢。
辛苦了。Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the International Conference on Design Futures 2021. Sorry. Sorry. Here. Okay. 可以看到吗? Okay. I'm Chen Yu, a PhD candidate at Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University. I'm very pleased to be here and moderate the conference. First, we will start the last session, the keynote and the panel speech to discuss about the futures design education. And the session is moderated by Shuxin CHENG. And she is director of Innovation Design, School of Design, Central Academy of Fine Arts, and she is founder of Innovation Geometry Research Platform. Now, welcome Shuxin CHENG to moderate the session. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chen Yu. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all today. My name is Shuxin. I'm currently teaching and directing innovation design program at Central Academy of Fine Arts at our design school. And so we have been in discussion about what's the future of education and how can we change and modify the future design education to a more open future. And also during this discussion I'm very happy to be the moderator of today's session. And so today we have a lot of distinguished guests from different universities to discuss what their view about the future education gonna be. And so as for us, we have been doing the future design experiments for the past 3 to 5 years. And it's a pleasure to have people from different disciplinaries to join together and discuss what potential future methodologies of design educations could be. And so for today's session, Futures Design Education, with the expectation of a more open, inclusive, and resilient education ecosystem, the objects and objectives of education, the means and the tools will also change. And how can we cultivate the future literacy of innovative talents, enhance power of shaping futures with design foresight, and empower futures to enhance global competence? Design disciplines need to contribute new solutions. And so today I'm really happy to be part of today's meeting and to welcome all the guests, and we will have some Q&A sessions after each speakers. So first of all, Professor Yang Dongjiang. So Professor Yang Dongjiang, he's also the Deputy Dean of the Tsinghua Academy of Arts and Design. And he is also a PhD professor. So welcome our first keynote speaker on education orienting the future. Yang 老师，您这边可以开始。
线上的国际会议，那么我们也特别高兴，希望能够通过这样一个平台，虽然疫情阻隔了我们，但是我们通过线上，还是能够大家一起很好的把我们的一些理念和一些实践的内容与大家一起来分享。那么今天我这个今天演讲的题目呢，叫做博学求新，来与大家一起分享面向未来的艺术与设计教育。那么上个月底，大家也都知道 ，Facebook 呢，它也这个重新的发布了一个它的新的一个品牌。那么呢，也是希望这个 Meta 平台能够成为一个全新的、功能也更加多元的一个互联网的社交媒体。因为互联网的发展呢，实际上近20年实际上是一个快速的一个飞速发展的一个时期。那么 Facebook 的这个 Meta 推出呢，可以说是像一个助推器一样，使得我们呢对方方面面，实际上对整个世界都会产生一定影响。虽然大家早就开始了在虚拟的世界里边开始构建我们的这个教育也好，或者我们的生活也好，但是呢，如何把虚拟的世界和我们现实的社会 能够很好的连接，其实也是大家一直在探索的一个主题和方向。那么你像 Matt 呢，他是希望借助 VR 和 AR 的技术呢，能够把用户呢在 3D 的虚拟世界当中呢，建立一种类似于跟现实生活一样的这样一个人机互动的，能满足工作、交流和娱乐的这样一个我想这也是一定是今后未来的一个发展的一个趋势、一个趋向。那么对于我本人来讲呢，我是1993年大学毕业到现在呢，也将近有30年的一个教龄。那么在这个过程当中呢，实际上我们也经历了非常快速的更迭和发展。就这张海报呢，实际上在90年或者现在已经是2000年以后出生的学生啊，他们可能感触并不是很深。但是对于我来讲呢，实际上在我成长时期，这是一个特别直观的一个写照。另外呢，实际上看似现在我们中国的年轻一代已经完全的融入了全球化的这种进程，同时呢，也完全与世界接轨，无论是他们的知识还是思维，还是说一些对于新知识的一些判断、一些批判精神，其实全部都是接轨的。但是其实有一点大家也应当注意，就是说，还是以我所在的这个清华大学美术学院为例，其实60%甚至可能更高的比例以上，其实还是1980年以前出生的一些老师。实际上呢，大家还是经过一个非常剧烈的一个转型期。那么我们说呢，对于我们中国来讲，速度是我们一个最大的优势，但同时呢，也是我们要面临的和非常需要花费精力去解决的一个问题，就是我们的速度发展太快。那么发展到今天呢，中国的互联网技术，包括我们的很多领域啊，在信息技术领域，包括我们的5G 技术，实际上现在目前已经在全球已经是领先。可是我们如果说我们按照1978年中国的改革开放算起，40几年的时间，实际上我们可以说是一个从认知到熟悉，再到掌握，现在又希望能够超越的这样一个过程。那么在这个过程当中呢，实际上我们有很多的事情其实是需要深度的思考，而且也有很多的问题需要我们审慎的、理性的去对待，然后做出一些理性的判断。那么我很欣赏这个德国的教育家也哲学家雅斯贝尔斯特说的一句话。那么他说，没有一个人能认识到自己天分中沉睡的可能性，因此需要教育来唤醒人所未能意识到的一切。我想对于一个教育工作者来说，如何去唤醒人们所未能意识到的一切，我想这可能是我们教育的一个根本，或者我们教育的真谛。那么也很高兴能够借助今天这样一个机会与大家一起来分享一下我们清华大学美术学院近些年在艺术与设计教育方面的一些思考和探索。因为我本人呢，也是在学院里边负责教学工作，所以呢，我可以把我们近些年的一些所做的一些事情跟大家一起来分享。那么对于清华大学美术学院来说呢，今年已经是我们第65个年头，因为从建院开始，我们可以说是中国第一所以艺术设计为主的这样一个院校，所以到今天来讲呢，我们学院的使命呢，还是以服务中国、贡献社会作为我们的使命。那么在这个学院的发展当中呢，也是以设计学科为核心，来构建多学科协同创新，来推动艺术与科学、设计与美术、创作与理论的这种交叉的融合。那么呢，也希望通过我们的努力，能够服务于国家创新驱动发展的这种战略需求，来推动基于中国传统文化的审美范式的形成和传播。我想，这既是我们学院的使命，我想也是我们作为教育工作者要和同学们一起去努力的一个方向。那么清华大学的整个的教学理念、教育理念呢， 是3位一体的一种培养的理念，也就是说知识传授、能力培养和价值塑造。那么这3个层级实际上是递进的。那么知识传授是最基本的，那么能力培养，我们希望能够培养学生掌握很好的专业的知识。那么价值塑造才是我们的核心。我想这种3位一体的教学理念，在世界范围内，我想也是各个教育院校大家共同的奋斗的一个目标。那么我们学院呢，现在也主要是有3个学科因为在中国来讲还是按照学科来划分。那么我们有设计学、美术学和艺术学理论。我们设计学呢有7个系，美术学呢有3个系，艺术学理论有1个系。那么其实在整个的教学当中呢，我们今天谈的实际上是面向未来的教育，但是呢我们在这个过程当中，实际上面向未来呢是某一个目标、一个方向。那么这种未来的目标实际上可以有近期的、中期的和远期的，但是无论在哪一个节点、哪一个过程当中，我想只有通过我们的努力，我们共同的实践，共同的去解决问题，才能够达到我们这个目标。所以在我们的这个教学当中呢，实际上我们的实验教学呢，是一个非常重要的一个学习的内容。所以说我们大部分的课程都是在我们的实验室来完成的。我们清华美院一共是这个6万平米的总建筑面积其中有1/4是我们的实验室面积，所以我们的非常多的课程，大部分的专业都在实验室里完成，而且有很多的这些共同的设备那么通过这样一个短片呢，大家也可以了解一下我们这个实验教学中心。我问一下主持人，是不是我又没有声音我这个现在有声音吗？
有的，杨老师，可以的，能听到视频的声音，可以。
能听到声音，好的，
能听到。
好的，好，像包括我们的这个信息艺术系包括我们的这个视觉传达系环境艺术系我们都有很强大的一个实验室作为我们教学的一个基地，所以同学们在这个实验的过程当中呢，来学习知识。那么我们说知识传授是吧？能力培养、价值塑造，那么也是对于我们艺术和设计专业的学生来说，也是通过实际上一点一滴的学习，一步一步的实践，去逐步去完成。那么同时呢，在这个教学当中呢，实际上我们也是就是产学研的这种相互的这种衔接渗透，也是我们一个重要的一个教学的步骤。像我们学院呢，一共有32个研究所，可以说是涉及了艺术跟设计的方方面面，是吧？包括我们的展示建筑环境，包括有空间类型的，是吧？也有这种这个像雕塑像这个中国的工笔绘画这种传统的，是吧？也有一些像智能产品设计未来的工程机械智能交互设计这些面向未来的或者面向信息技术的这种研究所。同时呢，像与大家生活相关的，比如家具设计研究所，对吧？游艇研究所，这些呢，包括健康医疗的这种研究所，其实也都是在教学的同时，能够很好的开展这种研究工作，能够与同学们一起来共同的发展和提高。那么同时在教学当中呢，其实我们的理念呢，也是就是说一定要在实践当中呢提高大家的这种认识的水平。那么在16年的时候呢，我们清华大学就建成了清华大学艺术博物馆。那么我们现在博物馆呢已经有1万多件的藏品，整个的建筑面积有3万多平。那么我想这在全国高校来讲，在全国整个的各种类型高校来讲，应当是可以说是最好的一个博物馆。因为目前在国内的高校博物馆里面呢，只有清华大学的艺术博物馆是国家的1级博物馆里边我们除了我们展出我们自己的藏品以外，我们也举办了很多像绘画达芬奇像这个西方绘画500年，从莫奈到苏拉热包括布德尔很多的高水平的这种展览，也包括设计方面的展览。那么同时呢，我想这个博物馆的建立呢，其实也是在为我们师生呢打开了一扇直面世界文化瑰宝的这样一个窗口。那么我们在这个课堂教学的同时也让 同学们呢开展了很多的现场的教学，包括现场的这种临摹的课程，也是希望呢为师生们呢能够提供与艺术大师近距离接触的这种非常生动的这种授课的方式。实际上这些呢看似传统的内容，实际上在这个里边呢还是希望引发大家的思考，是吧？可以这个以史为鉴，可以博古通今的来提高自己的认知能力和水平。另外呢，就是我们也注重国际化的这种发展啊。各位可能也清楚啊，再跟大家做一个汇报，就是17年的时候啊，就是在中国和意大利的两国国家元首见证下，我们和米兰理工大学呢就签署了合作协议。那么我们清华大学呢，一是在米兰设立了中意设计创新基地啊，待会这个傅志勇老师呢，因为也一直在参与这基地的工作，他们也会给大家进行汇报。那么同时呢，我们也独立设立了清华大学的米兰艺术设计学院。那么其实也是希望啊，这个设立呢，能够为学生提供具有国际视野的跨学科的跨文化的这种学习的实践机会。我想这在国内来说呢，也是一个比较好的一个资源和平台，而且也可以说在艺术设计领域里面呢，我们可以也是说走出了第一步啊，完全在海外来办学，其实也是希望呢，能够培养具有创新能力和这种知识体系以及全球胜任力的这种新型的创新型的设计人才，以适应全球化的这种挑战。那么我们在青岛呢，还有一个将近13万平米的一个创新研究院。那么这个创新研究院呢，叫做清华青岛艺术与科学创新研究院。各位可能也了解，在这个20年前，我们清华大学是1999年啊，这个进入清华大学以后啊，我们美术学院呢，在2001年就成立了艺术与科学研究中心。因为清华大学呢，作为国内一流的这种综合学科的这种院校，那么我们美术学院的加入呢，可以确实是说真正的把艺术与科学有一个非常好的一个结合。在2001年的时候，我们就办了第1届的艺术与科学的国际作品展。那么到这个目前，我们已经连续举办了5届。你像这个艺术科学展览呢，也是著名的这个诺贝尔的获奖者物理学家李政道先生和我们已故的这个著名艺术家吴冠中先生共同倡导的发起。那么实际上现在很多国际上的这种艺术科学领域的科学家也好，艺术家也好，都非常关注我们这样的一个这个活动赛事。那么同时，这个艺术科学研究中心的建立呢，其实也是我们希望能够充分的发挥清华大学设计学科人才的优势，同时呢与地方结合，通过艺术科学的这种融合的创新，包括成果的转化，这种人才的培养能够建设国际一流的培养、研发和服务的这样一个基地。那么在跨学科人才培养方面呢，我们说我们有了很好的一些基础，包括国际化的基础，包括这个一些很强的实践基地。实际这些年来呢，我们一直也在这方面呢做我们自己的努力。首先呢，我们比较影响的是我们信息中心一直在办的交叉学科的项目。这个交叉学科呢，是我们美术学院和这个新闻学院和计算机系一起来进行的一些项目，也是希望通过不同的类型、不同的知识背景、跨学科的师生的这种合作，能够在艺术科学领域能够有一些新的探索，能够在教学方面也能够有一些新的一些成果。同时呢，清华很早也是前几年就成立了这个新雅书院在新雅书院的带动下，后来又陆续的成立了几个书院。那么新雅书院呢，其中也专门有艺术设计的2学位。那么新雅书院呢，都是全国的可以说在高中阶段最优秀的学生来吸引进新雅书院。那么这些学生呢，也参与到艺术设计的这种2学位的培养过程当中呢，对我们来讲既是一个探索，同时呢，其实在这个过程当中也已经有非常好的一些成果的现象。还有呢，像这个 GID 项目是吧 ？GID 项目呢，是我们和这个英国的皇家艺术学院和帝国理工学院共同进行的交换项目。同时呢，像我们和米兰理工学院也有这种2学位的交换项目。通过这种2学位的交换项目呢，其实我们也是在不断的提升我们这种国际的影响力。同时呢，其实更重要的是在这种交流的过程当中，能够更好的去 了解艺术与设计发展的一些最前沿的趋势，而且在这个过程当中呢，大家共同来探讨如何面向未来的艺术设计教育，我们如何去面对，如何提出我们的解决方案。其实就像今天的这个研讨会一样，是吧？我们也希望通过这样一个平台能够有更好的一个探索。另外呢，就是 GX 项目，大家看到右边这个图片呢，就是这个它全称呢，是这个就是我们清华大学和这个华盛顿大学来共同创办啊，就是国际的创新的交流项目。那么这个 GX 项目呢，我们专门成立了清华大学成立有全球创新学院。那在这个全球创新学院里边呢，从今年开始，也专门我们美术学院和全球创新学院合作，专门招收设计专业背景的学生来进入到这个学院。因为这个学院的背景呢，大家知道这个华盛顿大学呢，也是和硅谷有很好的这种合作关系。实际上，这个全球创新学院呢，也是这个微软来赞助的一个学院，来资助的一个学院。那么在这个过程当中呢，我们设计学科的同学的加入，其实能够很好的和信息技术方面的这些同学能够产生很好的这种合作关系。同时，通过我们双导师制的这种培养，联合培养，也能够产生希望能够产生碰撞出一些新的创意。那么刚才呢，是跟大家简要的介绍了一下目前我们的学科的发展定位以及未来的一些发展方向。那么接下来呢，我想就是可能今天各位不能回避的一个现实，就是新冠疫情带给我们的冲击和挑战。那么去年年初新冠疫情刚刚到来的时候，确实给大家造成了非常大的影响，尤其是在教学方面，是吧？尤其是对于我们艺术与设计专业的这些同学和老师来讲，比如说创作环境的缺失，是吧？创作工具和材料的这种缺失，包括创作对象的缺失，包括交流互动和实时反馈的这种缺失，实际上给我们带来很多的不便。但是在这个过程当中呢，其实一是给我们学生提出了很严峻的问题，那么锻炼了我们老师和同学解决问题的能力，同时其实它也推动了这种信息化的这种发展。因为在新冠疫情出现之前，慕课已经是得到大家的广泛的认可，而且全球的所有的院校都在探索慕课未来发展方向。那么新冠疫情发展以后，那么由于疫情所引发的这些不便，使得我们马上就要去探索这些解决之道。那么经过几个月的时间的摸索，我想国内很多学校，尤其是我们学院大家解决了非常多的很好的办法。因为只有几个月的时间不到，就开始马上要毕业设计，马上要毕业创作。那么实际上大家面临困难的时候，还是想出了非常多的解决方案，而且这些解决方案，今天我们回过头比较理性的来看，实际上也是推动了这种信息技术介入我们生活的这种可能性和它未来的一个走向一个趋势。就像我一上来就讲的，实际上 Net 它的这种品牌的这种创立和推出，实际上我想新冠疫情这种大家面对面的这种沟通方式的这种挑战，实际上也是它的一个催化剂。那么面对这样一个挑战呢，实际上几个月不到，或者说疫情刚刚开始的时候，其实我们的很多毕业生就开始了毕业创作。那么我们的毕业展览怎么办？那么这是在去年的时候面对了一个非常非常严峻的问题。但是经过很短的时间在我们信息系，包括施丹青教授很多我们信息系的老师和我们学院的这个其他部门的同志一起通力合作，很快就研发出了一套我们自己叫做 2.5D 就不是纯3维的这种展览展示系统。所以也是说，实际上是倒逼我们去考虑如何在线上与大家进行沟通和交流。那么经过短短的不到1个月的时间，我们研发了一套系统，而且它有很强大的后台，有非常完备的这种数据体系和支撑。当然这个也是在这个阿里云的这种大力支持下来迅速的完成，而且取得了一个可以说是非常好的一个效果。无论是因为当时在疫情刚刚开始的时候，其实从清华大学的这个教务处也好，研究生学院也好，最担心的其实是什么？为什么呢？因为我们的时间性太长， 是吧？如何去真正去面对这种危机，去迎接这种危机挑战？实际上，大家
the pandemic, actually, those are the issues that we have to think about. But through our practice, we don't say that it was better than these offline events, but we have been able to give full play to the role of the modern technologies, which will also help us with our future teaching, education, exchanges, and communication. And this platform, after its application, it can be applied to other institutes, universities, colleges, and companies. We hope that through this way of facilitation, first of all our students have participated in this because they have to build up their exhibition hall, they have to digitalize their work and to post their works online. This is also a very good opportunity for the practice of the students, and also help us to combine the offline and online teaching and learning. In the ICDE, which has just concluded, once again, these concepts and the platform have been tested. And I believe that every country will like to think about that. How do we adapt to the future changes? So in this international conference just concluded, but our exhibition will only end on the 15th of next month through different types of workshops, events, exhibitions, as well as the exhibition of the excellent works from the graduates from different universities in the world. We provide different ways of communication, different themes, and we have invited the universities across the world to talk about the modern value of arts and to showcase the latest achievements in art education. And under this background, we have been following the latest development and the pace of the era. We hope that the global education, the students across the world to ask the questions together, because asking questions is the first step for solving those problems. Through asking questions, we can reach consensus and to make joint efforts in our exploration. Like we come together here today to talk about the future of education. Only by asking our questions and posing our issues and concerns, we can put forward more specific solutions. And here we ask a lot of questions. For example, whether we can be friends with machines in the era of AI, and how do we dress up in the era of space, as well as how do we maintain relationship in this pandemic era. So those problems will help us to think about the developments in the future. And during this whole process of the conference, of course, it is subject to the impact of the pandemic, but we have very successfully carried out our exhibition. And through the exhibition, we can provide a good platform for people to exchange and communicate. And in our day one forum, we have invited 26 directors or presidents of universities to talk about the future directions of art education. And you can have a look at the recorded video about this forum. We also held 8 parallel workshops for art education. And at those parallel workshops, we came together to talk about the issues we have confronted, for example, in the context of multidisciplinary education, and how do we explore the new values and the new responsibilities and the new species, new directions. Within one day, we've invited over 100 educators and designers across the world to talk about the issues we were concerned about. Actually, we had very good communication and interactions with each other. More importantly, we have posed many solutions for our questions. And we had a very important exhibition, that is the exhibition to display the excellent works of the graduates from the arts and design institutes across the world. It is very lucky for us that we can have this online platform for us to exhibit the works of the graduates. This year, we have more than 50 colleges and universities participated in this exhibition. Actually, all the universities and colleges in the world can use such a platform to learn about the latest developments and the issues that we are thinking about at the design and art colleges and universities, so that the students can start from their own perspective to think about and ponder about those issues. During the whole exhibition, we have the works dedicated to industrial design and what's the direction for future evolution, as well as the topics related to cities and how do we see the impact of art on our soul, and how do we continue, as well as how do we connect with our emotions and the future development of information technology. And when the future will arrive, we also have the events focused on fashion design, as well as other works about stories and how the timeline will unfold. We have these 10 topics for the exhibition of the excellent works of the graduates. Also, the professors and teachers can have a lot of takeaways and inspirations from those works. The platform can be a very good way for people to learn about the future trends of development in art and design. At least it can be one of the windows to learn about those latest information. We made use of multimedia exhibition and technology to provide audience with also these physical and offline spaces for exhibition. It took us over like half a month to work with the professors. We have professors. We worked with 5 teams, as well as the arts and the design institutes and the colleges in the world, to focus on our international art and the design workshops. For example, we have the robot carnival, crisis countdown, zero gravity fashion, super digital scenes, and etc. Those are the things that are quite closely with our daily life, like the digital perception, as well as we hope that more young people can participate in this process through this remote as well as in-person communication. We can promote and expand the scope and the environment of our teaching. Those are some pictures we have taken from the scene of the workshops. Our students only had half a month, but they have developed brilliant works. And this exhibition will end on the 15th. So today we are here to talk about future education. And last week, UNESCO has just published a prospective report by the director of UNESCO, by the Director General of UNESCO, that how do we construct the new framework for the future developments so that we can respond to the major changes in education. Design education has already gone beyond individual creation or individual ideas. It's actually closely related with our society, and in that UNESCO report. So it also proposed that how do we respond to globalization, how do we address and tackle climate change, and what are the challenges and shocks brought by information technology, and on the basis of respect of diversification, how do we carry out education, how to incorporate environmental education into our regular teaching and learning. And we should also take into consideration of the right application of technology. So we should develop a critical mindset in terms of the application of technology. So this is a very important report that we should have a look at, because it is very informative for us as educators, for us to extend to the discussion on other topics. In this report, so it also used this concept of futures for us to learn about that there are many different types of futures. That has been allocated by China in the context of globalization. We have the diversification of culture as well as other aspects. We should understand that we have different ways of culture and understanding. So there is nothing in the world that is not diversified. So we should use this diversification concept to think about all the things around us. So the wishes and the aspirations of people from different countries and the races may not be consistent with those of everybody. Because of our different positions, identities, we can present very diversified viewpoints. Instead of depicting just one future, we should open our mindset to embrace the diversity of different futures. As an art educator, and here, last but not least, I would like to share with you some of my observations and thinking. Well, for education for the future, we should think about how do we construct a new way or new framework towards the education of art and design in the age of information. We are now in this era of information. How our education will not only enable our students to grasp the pace and the trends of the time, they can also go beyond the present. So that is about how do we build a new model for personalized learning and the lifetime exploration. The learning is not just restricted to our learnings in schools, from primary school to middle school, high school to university. We say that learning is diversified. It can be personalized, individualized, and the lifelong learning. And during the process of the learning, at any time, at any time and anywhere, we should think about this. And for us, in our practice, how do we incorporate future into our practice and the scope of our education so that we can better enable our students to master the skills? And more importantly, how do we have our students to develop these skills of learning to learn? They should be critical, prospective, and they should have this capability of forecast. So I only have half an hour, so I have to conclude here because I have just introduced you the latest developments at our academy and my thinking about the education for the future.
So I also want to thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity. Thank you much. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Yang, for sharing with us about the School of the Art and Design of Tsinghua University. So based on what Professor Yang's sharing, and now we are going to have a panelist speech. So later, I think for the panelists, they are going to be very specific about how to respond to this demand for the education. And they will also elaborate based on their own experience. So after Professor Yang's speech, Mr. Yang talked about this future-oriented art education. Okay, our next panelist. So next, I think I will be the moderator of our next session for the panelists. So Dr. Yang has made the keynote speech. So later, I think each of the speakers, you will have about 20 minutes, and we will have a simple Q&A. The first speaker we have is also from Tsinghua University, Professor Fu Zhiyong, Associate Professor, Academy of Art and Design, Tsinghua University, Associate Director of China-Italy Design Innovation Hub. He will share with us about building the interdisciplinary ecosystem and a new infrastructure of design futures. Welcome, Dr. Fu. Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be given this opportunity to share with you about our practice in Tsinghua, in the Academy of Arts and Design, building the interdisciplinary ecosystem and a new infrastructure of design futures.
傅老师好像 PPT 共享的是那个不是全屏，它是那个。
So Dr. Fu, can you have the full screen? Okay. So Tsinghua University is an integrated university, an arts academy of art and design as a quite a unique discipline. We have the interdisciplinary cooperation. So my background is that in the design, technology, and innovation. I have done a lot of practice and research. So currently in the world, we have so many challenges and opportunities on the ecosystem, crisis, as well as the new technologies and issues we need to work on. So globalization has also been conducted. We need to have novel ideas. So in the short run, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals by United Nations. In the far future, we have the carbon neutrality, carbon peaking, and carbon neutrality in the future. So to be more specific on the implementation way, like President Xi, he has shared his vision about building a community with a shared future for mankind. And he has also proposed to take the actions to build the shared community. A community of the shared future for mankind is an integrated methodology. It's not only about the human, it's also about the life and nature. And the core of that is about the shared future. So by looking at the paper we have been doing, you can see that the trend in the research paper of the shared future and future studies. So we have searched some of the keywords, and you can see focus on the climate change, the social economic development, global governance, etc. A few days ago, China-US has signed the joint Glasgow Declaration on enhancing the climate action in the 2020s. You can see that this target is of great importance for the future. We know that there is a quote. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And that will lead to the future studies. It is a part of the sociology, or we call it the futurology. It's related to the trend, possible prospect, challenges, and strategies. So in the business and the commercial and the technology, there are many available tools that can be used for the market research, the forecast about the future. For the evolution of the design concerns, you can see there is also a trend that from the object-oriented to the user-oriented, society-oriented, nature-oriented, and futures-oriented. So the time, stakeholders, environment have all become the factors to think about. So based on the community of the shared future of mankind, we have considered about this future literacy, future society, future philosophy, and future education. So that's why we have identified this kind of the new disciplinary topics that is about the design future. So for the design futures, it focuses on the impact of the short-term and long-term futures on the current society through exploring future signals and foreseeing future scenarios. Design futures leading industrial transformation and social evolution through futures thinking, designing a more desirable future for the community with a shared future with co-creative methods. So I also would like to share with you about the ecosystem map of the design futures. So for example, the education program, innovation, new infrastructure, workshop, projects, international conference, global network. Based on this concept of the Tsinghua University, that from the values shaping, we focus on the futures thinking and how to respond to the uncertainties of the future to explore the possibilities. Another one is that based on the United Nations or the UNESCO's idea about the future literacy, that is a series of the knowledge and capacity. As for the competence of the shaping the future, from the value to the knowledge to the capacity, we hope that we can help our students that they will know how to use and empower this capacity. UNESCO actually in the future literacy laboratory has summarized about the future literacy, why it is so important. So you can see that the previous speakers have already shared about that. And based on the community with a shared future from the perspective of information from the internet, digital space, we will also want to say that to the human and also we can see the knowledge, wisdom, more importantly, the social evolution, as well as the target, and we come to the real society, which is a more general. So when we think about this knowledge and ideas, so you can see that in the nature system, it is built on what we have is an information-based, the shared future of the mankind. The knowledge structure of design futures, it is a futures thinking oriented design, economy, strategy, and technologies. We have also been talking about this kind of the novel ideas and also on the designs, the critical thinking, the economic sectors, technologies, and also computing ideas. All of that will lead to the students' new capacity. So all these capacity or capability requirements of design future come from many disciplines and practice. So based on this kind of education and training, we have also built the knowledge modules. For example, like constructing futures, speculating futures, creating futures, and transforming futures. That from theory to the method and the practice. So all this is an integrated structure of the futures. We hope that for our curriculum, for our practice, it can also generate some impact. So when we take that as a methodology, we will consider the future ideas, the futures thinking, and based on the future thinking and design thinking, we have designed the whole set of the methodology. So that means the design system of the design futures. So for example, like the empathy, symbiosis, scenario building, prototype, enlightenment, reflective evaluation, digital curation, new design infrastructures, all of them together has this kind of a future-based design. So for these kind of methodologies and the practice, we have applied that to our courses. So this is one of the courses we have. So that we have a design fiction, interaction design, augmented reality, and the digital curation. So when putting them together, it's a community with a shared future. And based on what we need to do with our life, to do this innovative design. The second one is about the new infrastructure modules. So for example, the futurology, the method, etc. And we also have the case studies, the people, personal library, speculative object, etc. So all of that can support us to have the sustainable research and innovation. And also in the activities and the practice, we have also organized a lot of the workshop. So for example, we targeted cities, we leverage the service and to integrate with all the different stakeholders to build the preferable futures to meet our sustainability requirement and to make it more resilient. So last year in Chengdu, we take it as a practice space. And we have this our Design Partner 2.0 workshop. So through the domestic and international collaboration, we have built the different design features and proposals. During this process, we have also taken our design tools and methodologies to be applied. And this year, we have this Future Pioneer workshop. So you can see that we have the periscope of the future pioneers to think about the relationship between human and pet. This time for the future pioneer, we have a lot of universities and students, and also we have generated a very good result. So for the future practice from 2019, we have the artificial intelligence cities. And also furthermore, we place that on the platform of the metaverse. So it's about how to create this the AI city, how to make your choice, how to build the preferable future. So for this kind of the platform and this methodology can definitely help us to think about the design future and also the trend. And number 5. So you can see that from the last year, we have organized about this the international conference about the future theory, future exploration, future empowerment, and future trend. This year, we have chosen topic future philosophy, creation, society, and future design education. We also have collected the papers which has shown for the young scholars and our students' ideas, as well as the launch of the activities and the environment. So finally, I want to talk a little bit how we can make this design future to be more expanding, to be more sustainable, and to have more global network and outreach. So for example, we have been working with a professor with Milan University of Technology and Carnegie Mellon University. We have built this global design futures network. This network wants to connect the diverse design futures community and to take this kind of the anticipated perspective and to have the hybrid disciplines. And when there are a lot of the uncertainties, and we hope that we can take the strong actions. So for this network, you can see that we hope that it's not only about the research or answers to the questions. We are also very interested in their final output. For example, the publications, the international academic research result. But of course that for the global design future, for our China-Italy Design Innovation Hub, we have also conducted a lot of activities. It is a global cooperation platform. At the same time, it can be used as a frontier that for the values. So based on this target, we have also the Design Futures Literature exhibition to promote the cultivation of the future literacy. So you can see that we hope that our research can be fully presented to the researchers, as well as to anyone who is interested in this. So this is about the ecosystem of our design future. You can see many of them. We will continue to release the information on our website. We also hope that for other global scholars and participants to join us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Fu. Thank you very much for your very systemically to share with us about the disciplinary design, the practice. So I want to ask you a question. So today, our forum is about the future education. So would you like to share with us about that in the curriculum of the future designs? How do you want to take it as an education program? Okay. I think when talking about the design future, it is something very new. So for the curriculum itself, actually in the 学堂在线, we already have the courses called the Introduction of the Design, working with Carnegie Mellon University. In the future, we are considering to develop a series of the curriculum and the courses and to make it more interdisciplinary. And also we hope that it can attract the students. So for example, to look at about the future,
city regeneration and prospects into the future strategies and etc. We can work together to explore those disciplinary areas, especially the design futures and the series of courses and or diploma courses can help us to address the issues that we have confronted in designs, but also it can go beyond different disciplines to look into the futures as well as to develop our capabilities to address the future challenges and also to address the targets we would like to achieve in the future society. I would like to ask a specific question about what do you think of this course? It is targeted at the arts and the design students. or it is targeted at a specific discipline? What's your suggestions or thinking from your side? First of all, what I try to do is that to make it into an idea or methodology into our interactive design course. Now it has been separated independently to form an independent course, or it can be called design futures or future studies. This is a very important area in social studies. We hope that in the future it can be a course to be provided to different students of different backgrounds for them to develop futures literacy. And it can be a very important course to help us to address the issues in different disciplines, and it should also develop its own set of methodologies. At least it should be a series or a set of courses from theories to practices. In the future, maybe it can be developed into a master's degree program. And we know that in different colleges and universities in different countries, they have set up such a course. RMIT, as well as colleges and universities in Canada, they are now providing this kind of programs, and we can provide this course in the China-Italy Innovation Center to set up such a program for us to work together to address and to tackle the common issues we're confronted with. Thank you, Professor Fu, for the sharing. And together with what Mr. Fu, Professor Fu has shared with us about the design futures practices, next I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, panelist speaker. We're going to invite our next speaker.
OK， 我们下一位嘉宾呢是来自
The next speaker is Professor Ashley Hall from the Design Innovation School of Design, Royal College of Arts, and visiting professor at the Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing.
Yes, I'm here. Good to see you.
Great to see you. So it's daytime there. It's afternoon?
Yes, it's lunchtime actually, so it's midday in London.
Great. Lovely to see you online. So now I'd like to welcome you to give the second panelist speech about the challenge and opportunities for design futures. So you could try to share your screen. Let's see if it works.
Yes, here we go. So, can you see that? You should see a blue screen there with design futures, challenges and opportunities in the center screen.
Yeah, that looks great. So please.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. So thanks, Shuxin, for the introduction. My name is Ashley Hall. I'm a professor of design innovation in Royal College of Art, and I'm a visiting professor of innovation design in CAFA in Beijing as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about design futures and some of the challenges and opportunities ahead of us as well. So some of this involves talking about some of our methods, design futures, some of the challenges and opportunities, speculation and illustration, moving towards action for design futures, reactive to proactive design, designing collaborative futures, and also design for future transformation. So I'd like to start talking about this, which is the Johari Window, and it was developed as a model for understanding and enhancing the relationship or the perception of others. So that's the little model you see there in the top left hand of the slide. And then it gets very interesting if you introduce this to design and we start thinking about how design works. So for example, the types of design that are known to us and known to others often helps us develop iterative design. And then when we're designing something that's unknown to us, but known to others, that brings us into the area of classic user-centered design. And then design, which is unknown to others, but known to us, puts us in a position of being expert designers. And interestingly, design future sits in this fourth window, the kind of hardest window, really. So this is design which is unknown to us and unknown to others, which is one of the reasons why it's, I think, certainly from my perspective, is a continuous challenge for some of our design methods. So thinking about the future, a vast majority of our design activity is for the next 2 to 3 years, what we call Horizon 1. So this is designing for things which are within the envelope of manufacturing or close to being industrialized. And then very little activity takes place in Horizon 2, so designing for things which are 5 years out. And then designing for things which are 10 years out is really quite rare. And yet the vast majority of our skills, certainly in industrial design, product design, are geared towards Horizon 1. So they're actually geared towards industrialization, designing products or systems for immediate rollout. And so when we look at design futures methods, we could probably group them into 2 different areas. One of these is kind of more industrially focused and where we have an idea of thinkable futures. So this means road mapping, ABCD, scenario planning, and this generally works through forecasting. So trying to imagine what the futures are based on existing knowledge or data or information. Then we have another type of design futures, which is more critical. So this is about speculating about the future, design fictions, maybe anticipatory design, gym data for futures. And what we try to do here is we try to imagine the unthinkable futures and we try and generate these future visions. But the majority of these activities are relatively weak on feedback loops, and we still haven't connected design to some of the leverage points which helps us really act and change those features, either to deliver them or to avoid them. So we have this gap in our methods between the sort of more industrial thinkable methods and some of the unthinkable futures that are coming towards us. And if we think about design and its relationship to the future, a lot of this has been taking place through the designer as expert. So this is where the designer generates that sort of future vision. Aesthetically based as well, and visual language. And we can even see this going back to early examples. For example, this is Raymond Lowy, 1936. He's designing a sort of Pacific locomotive train, and it looks like it comes from the future. It has this kind of future aesthetic. And right through to 2009, this is Tony Dunn and Fiona Raby's project design for an overpopulated planet. So this is foragers. So this is where food runs short and we have to sort of suck up little tiny animals out of lakes or out of the trees, bushes, grass, kind of give ourselves enough nutrients. So it's a kind of critical future. It's showing us a future which probably won't exist, but it's trying to highlight those issues. And of course, one of the challenges here is around feedback loops. You know, how do we generate feedback loops from these critical speculative futures to change ideas today, change activity today, influence industry, influence government, and influence groups of people in society? And some of the work we've been doing is around exploring future languages. This is a project we did with British Airways in 2019 around the future flying. So we're looking right up to the year 2119. This project is a self-packing suitcase. So you put the material flat on your bed or your table, you put all your objects on top, and it then folds around your objects and it kind of carefully packs and puts all the fragile pieces in the middle and makes sure that it's safe for travel. And the suitcase also negotiates with other suitcases, so you can change its shape and optimize the amount of space it takes up, say, in the back of a car or in the hold of an aeroplane. And it also has features like gesture transparency. But again, you know, we're sort of we're pushing visual language, we're pushing our idea, the visual aspects of the future. But one thing we're not so good at is understanding our social position and the kind of morals and values that we might have. So, for example, if we're thinking about the year 2050, you know, what things will be acceptable, which things won't be acceptable, how will society change, and how will our values change? So it's relatively expected for designers to generate new forms, you experiment with new technologies, but the social aspect is less explored. And that's one of the areas that we have, I believe we have an opportunity for greater future development. And of course, coming from a design background, you know, one of our great limitations is the fact that we're always adding. You know, design is about plus. It's always about adding something to the world. And this is one of our, I guess, emerging critiques of design, where we now realize that design has to be plus minus. We have to understand that we have to add and subtract, or we have to hybridize, or we have to dematerialize. And we have to step back from these design methods and these design expectations that are always putting something on the face of the planet. And that changes design's relationship to industry, changes our relationship to government, NGOs, and institutions that we might work with as well. So there's a profound shift in how we move from the 20th century model of design, which is around industrialization to the 21st century model design, which has to be much more strongly engaged with the future and steering and navigating us through the various steps to gain the futures that we might want to arrive at. And talking about futures, this is some work we did with Craig Bremner, and it's called Learning Design for the Unthinkable World. And we did this at the beginning of the pandemic, so it's about a year and a half ago. And he asked this question: has the real world become an unthinkable world? And I believe many of us probably the answer is yes. You know, the consequences we couldn't imagine, the impact we couldn't imagine. We thought the impact was probably going to be physical and healthcare, but actually it's more psychological and economic. So we've actually ended up in a future which for many of us, you know, wasn't thinkable. Yes, we knew the pandemics are possible to happen in regular events through history, but the effect this time has been very different, and part of that is because it's a first pandemic we've lived in real time. So we've had real-time information, and that's changed our psychological relationship to it. So this is an example of where you know, potentially the activity and the design activity was very, let's say, reactive. You know, designers developed new face masks, and they developed new technology solutions, many of them very, very good. But it was a reactive form of design, and we have to really question if that's the best use of design, and whether a more proactive version of design ought to be thought about. I just wanted to put this slide in. It's Hancock and Bezold, and it's from a World Health Organization consultation in 1993. So this was actually the first time, well, certainly the earliest example of the futures cone that we found. And of course, that was all pointing towards healthcare and you know, triggering us to think about the probable, the preferable, and the wildcard futures, and helping us understand that there's a perspective of expanding numbers of futures, and triggering this idea of which ones do we actually want to push ourselves towards, which ones do we want to aim at. And this is some work from one of my PhDs, Julia Lohman, who wrote a PhD on Department of Seaweed. Part of her work was speculative collaboration. And through that work, she began to realize that we don't have one cone, we have multiple cones. And some people have very short cones. They look at maybe 6 months ahead. Some people look at maybe a year ahead, 10 years ahead. Some people even think they're looking forwards when actually they're looking backwards. And this is one of the big challenges for design, is how do we collaborate, and how do we develop a kind of co-speculation towards the future, and how to build new tangible methods, not only just to see those futures, but also to loop back, to build the feedback loops so that we can actually deliver them as well. And of course, we're not all in the same present. You know, we might technically be in the same year, but we're not in the same temporal dimension. And we're not all looking in the same direction either. You know, some of us are looking backwards, some of us are looking forwards, some of us looking sideways. We think we might all be looking towards the future. And of course, our horizons keep moving forwards. The future keeps advancing moment by moment. So I believe we need a projective, prospective, participatory, and proactive attitude, and a set of methods towards developing the future, particularly around trying to identify what these steps are, and how do we think about design, not in terms of a product or a solution or a service, but a number of negotiated steps which evolve and change as we steer ourselves towards these preferable futures. And of course, there's been great work by UNESCO and around future literacy, and about collaborating future visions, new visualization techniques, and guiding social futures. And this is very important for us to understand how we can work with different groups of people around the world, how we can start building new ways, not only of visualizing those futures and shifting them, but also delivering them as well. How do we build that sort of process towards this area? We've been doing a little bit of work around prospective futures towards this. This is Fernando Galdon. It's part of his PhD, and what's quite interesting here is the idea of flipping the futures cone around. So instead of the futures cone opening out, we actually work on how do we close it up, how do we narrow the futures cone, how do we steer ourselves from the past towards a present, towards a future, how do we understand these trajectories, how do we extrapolate information, and then how do we develop this steering process to bring us towards those futures that we'd rather end up at rather than the ones we don't. And this is kind of quite a nice quote. It's by Hofanga Osutimo Mahinga. And I'm going to read this out. People are thought to walk forward into the past and walk backwards into the future, both taking place in the present. where the past and the future are constantly mediated in an ever-transforming present. And I think this is a really great quote, and it tends to shine this very strong light around our behaviours, and particularly about how we do tend to walk backwards into the future. We tend to think about the future in terms of what we've learned, things that come from the past, information from the past. And I just wonder whether this is a major issue, whether we really struggle to disconnect ourselves from this historical version of the future, where we keep looking at the future over our shoulder, but it's informed by all the things that we've done. I think there's a real limitation to that. And in terms of the future and time, this is hopefully quite an interesting argument about three different domains of thinking. And if we think about science, it always tells us effectively what has been, a system which has been observed, an experiment which has been completed. And this is incredibly important because we need to understand the foundational knowledge of the world. And then the arts and humanities, whether you're writing, painting, making a film, it's created in the now, even if it's about the future or if it's about the past. It actually tells us about our attitudes and relationships to each other from the now. And design, of course, is always for future transformation. Design is always about what comes next. It's not about the past. It's a different form of knowledge. And the interesting thing about design for future transformation is it's always about how we can communicate, how transmissible are our ideas. And the big challenge that we have ahead of us is to figure out how to govern these relationships between knowledge of the past, knowledge for the present, and knowledge for future transformation. How do we work across sciences, design, arts and humanities to collaborate this thinking so that we can develop a powerful transition towards those preferred futures. And then, of course, we tend to think about futures being about human beings, about humans being the center. This is Johanna Schmier. Her research is called Xeno Design. So it's about how do we design for the other? How do we design beyond the human being? And how do we start thinking about a more expansive version of design, recognizing that we can't put ourselves at the center of every single future design activity? And of course, part of that involves inverting the design value pyramid. If we think about the three generations of design, the first generation designers were experts. We're experts at design for other human beings. Then we realized that didn't always work out. And sometimes the people we were designing for knew more about the problems than we did. So we invented human-centered or user-centered design to realize that, in fact, designers weren't always experts. And of course, now those activities have created climate change, and a vast range of kind of social issues that we're all trying to tackle, and the previous speaker covered those, and I'm sure many other people have covered those in this series of talks as well. So it kind of brings us towards thinking about the anthropocentralized design. How do we take humans off the top of the pyramid, and how do we start thinking about designing for all species? How do we think about designing for the other? And how do we change this set of design methods that have primarily existed in the 20th century and earlier around adding products, and around doing that with an almost universal centering around the human being. So this is one of our greatest challenges, really. How do we deal with ourselves in the future of the world? In terms of design education, we have a gap between this reactive design. Pandemic, again, I said, was a great example. We did some great design in terms of trying to solve problems, but we weren't very good at all about trying to prevent that problem. So our proactive design methods are relatively weak there. And of course, we have this gap between being an expert and a collaborator. We need both. We need to measure both expertise and collaboration in terms of future literacy and understanding how to work with different groups of people. Human behavior and changing human behavior is critical to our futures, but at the same time, we need to de-anthropocentrize. We need to take the human off the top of the pyramid. And we also have this gap between speculation, between imagining new futures, abductive thinking, and also the feedback loops that we might want to generate. And so this is some of the thoughts that we've been having in the Royal College of Art. It's in our MA design products and our design futures pathway. And we're thinking about how we design for different models of temporality. Different parts of the world, people have different understandings of what the future actually is. How we develop unconventional futures, how we understand resilience and failure, how we develop feedback loops for more powerful leverage so we can move towards those futures that we prefer to go to with more confidence. and how we also decolonize the future. And of course, decolonization is also about recolonization as well. So there's all sorts of interesting opportunities there. So finally, our practices are going to be around continuous designing, envisioning unthinkable futures, taking humans off the top of the pyramid, finding steps to preferred futures, and recognizing that much of this is about how we actually negotiate human behavior, and also maybe take an angle towards technology agnosticism, which means not always worshipping technology or seeing it as necessarily the answer to many of these future challenges. So thank you very much for listening, and happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, Ashley. It's always a pleasure to listen to your talks, and I'm very happy to ask you some questions. So maybe we can discuss something about future education. As today's panel's theme is about future of education, as you teach multiple programs and also leading multiple programs at the RCA, and you also work with me at CAFA for innovation design. I'm wondering, like, when you are doing education practices and research in different countries with different cultures, and when you are applying the future education methodologies, is there anything that you think are in common that you would like to share with us, or you think is kind of what's the differences or that kind of main differences that you have for what we're doing these years? What's your thoughts?
I think I think that's a really good question, and I guess actually from my experiences, I tend to think that we're actually rather similar in lots of ways, and we come to conferences like this and exchange our ideas, and more they become more familiar. We talk about anticipating the future, we talk about the preferred futures, we talk about futures literacy. So I think many of those ideas are sort of more commonly shared. But at the same time, also makes me think that in fact, we ought to be more diverse. And although it's great to share these, ideas, many of which are very powerful and very important, diversity is important for the future as well. And sometimes we need to collaborate so that we differentiate. We collaborate with each other so we become more different. And I'm not necessarily sure that it's a healthy thing that we all agree that we have exactly the same future. And we each stand in a different place, we stand in a different geography, we stand in a different time. And so I think actually, some of that diversity of futures is also important, because I think it's very difficult at the moment, certainly from our perspective, to collaborate or to create activities where everybody agrees at the same place at the same time and they have the same future objectives. So I believe certainly in terms of education, that's quite a sophisticated challenge.
Great. And also I think like during these days, like when we doing teaching online and also teaching offline, so the online tools for teaching and online tools for communication also kind of make it easier for us to exchange ideas without traveling, without more and more complicated stuff that we have to go through maybe in the past, and it kind of become more common for we to reach out the educational teaching methods to people from different places as well. Yeah. And also I'm wondering, relating to your speech, you're talking about Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3, about the different types of design for the future. I'm wondering, like, for your thoughts and and what's kind of the main focus that people have been putting emphasis on about design education in the past, and what might need us to put more effort to look at in the future?
Yeah, so I think in relation to the three horizons, in a sense, for me, there's a drop off. So we have Horizon 1, where we have classic industrial design courses, designed for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's a very tangible activity. It brings lots of people into the educational system because they're interested in this kind of activity. And then suddenly we have sort of design futures and speculative critical design, which builds sometimes some very, very inspirational and very sophisticated ideas of the future. And yet we still have this gap in how we deliver them. So at the moment we have this two kind of quite distinct set of practices, and there's a need for a third piece. There's a need for that abductive thinking about the future, those speculative projects, or those critiques of the future, or those projects which proactively steer us towards the futures that we want to arrive at. And yet the actual mechanism for delivering that is far less clear. So for design, I think that's the big challenge, probably over the next couple of decades, is how we start understanding what those stepping stones are, how we work in collaboration, how we build more effective literacy, more visualized methods or experiential methods to understand what those futures might actually be, and who to partner with as well. How does design strategically link to government, industry, economics, finance? How do we actually do that? And how do we kind of partner to make those futures become more realizable, really?
Great. Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you for your time. And thank you. 然后我们导播的老师，我们可以切到我们下一位嘉宾的节目。
We would like to invite our next speaker.
好，然后我们切到下一位嘉宾。
The next speaker.
我们可以请下一位嘉宾做一下准备。OK， 然后我们下一位即将进行。
Our next speaker is from Italy, head of design department, Politecnico di Milano, professor of industrial design, PhD tutor, Alessandro Deserti.
So now we would like to welcome to our next speaker, Professor Deserti. Hello.
That's right.
Hello. 然后我们下一位演讲嘉宾的主题是设计。
So the topic is the Polymy Design Think Tank from Possible Futures to Alternative Presents.
And so I would like to introduce the title of your talk. So you're gonna give us a talk about the Polymy Design Think Tank and from possible future to alternative presence, converting design research into innovation convergences. Thank you. So please share your screen. Let's do that.
Yeah. I just try to do this. Let me see if I make it. Oops.
Okay.
There you are.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it works well. Please start. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, nice to be here with you today. Thanks for the kind invitation and the opportunity of introducing this initiative. Let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Alessandro Deserti. I'm currently director of the Department of Design at the Politecnico di Milano. I'm actually dealing with mainly product design, but also frequently design of services, and more recently policies, particularly in my research activities. Like many others that operate in the field of design, I'm frequently challenged with this necessity of looking at possible alternative futures and drawing information from there, and then more frequently designing in the present and trying to find solutions for current needs. And based on this, and based on the experience of many of my colleagues, and based on research that we carried on over the last years, we decided to establish a specific initiative at the Politecnico di Milano in our department, with which we want to look at the future and look at the future in a way in which we can possibly serve the needs of businesses on the one hand and institutions on the other hand. this initiative, as you will see, is called Polimi Design Think Tank. And I'm here to introduce it by, first of all, setting the scene and then telling you briefly what we are going to do within this initiative, and then bridging it to research, consultancy, but also teaching and educational activities that we carry on. Well, of course, foresight studies and theories are relevant for innovation. We have always been trying to look at the future to define trajectories for innovation. Actually, we have done this quite frequently, almost always, for taking decisions in the present. So the questions the basic question we started from in establishing this initiative is not only what will the future be like, but also and particularly what will the present be like, which looks like an oxymoron, but indeed, as I will show you, is something fairly interesting and relevant, because it combines the idea of looking at the future and at the same time operating in the present with this capacity of bridging present and the future, or future, or bringing back the future to the present. So basically, you have already seen this in the previous presentation. You can look at futures in many different ways and using different tools, and futures can be described in different ways and also anticipated, I don't say designed, in different way. What has clearly emerged, but this arcs back to the ancient past, indeed, is the fact that we are constantly looking at the future as human beings, that we are constantly looking for ways of doing this properly, but we are indeed unable to predict the future. And in fact, future studies, but also the way in which design looks at the futures are, let's say, based on the idea that you can have many different and alternative futures. And when you discuss about future, you're typically not discussing about one single future, but possibly many futures. The point that we would like to make is that we do this because we are interested in the present, and we have to take decisions in the present. So the future is interesting, not only as something that we look at, something that we observe, but also as a position from which to look at the present. So we can set up possible, alternative, plausible, preferred future and build these as positions from which to look at the present. Indeed, future and present, depending on the sectors, also the kind of technologies that characterize these sectors, the disciplines that look at the future, are actually constantly merging with the present. So the distinction between present and future is, in a sense, fairly blurred. Based on this, we are currently working on a combination, which is one of the possible ways of dealing with the future, of forecasting, that is, ways of setting up this possible and alternative future, with backcasting, or else the idea that we can possibly turn these futures that we design into tools that can support decisions that we typically have to take in the present. Going to design differently than other approaches and disciplines, and particularly looking at design in connection with futures, design for sure has specific characteristics and capacities. The capacity to elaborate qualitative data and evidence, to do this in a peculiar way in which, in most cases, users or humans are at the center of innovation. And the point is to constantly analyze and respond to needs and problems of users and humans. This is maybe not even enough, because we are today not only looking at users, but I would say more and more involving them in a constant way in the design process. So we are actually not only observing them from outside, but cooperating with them in order to clarify the kind of needs, but also develop together some of the solutions for those needs and problems. One other characteristic that is relevant in design is that innovation trajectories can be turned into solutions in a very concrete way, by turning solutions into prototypes, which are tools for performing some tests and refining solutions up to their subsequent versions, in sort of a loop in which solutions can be constantly honed. So academic design research can be seen in this perspective as a powerful tool to identify what we call innovation convergences and directions, and turn them into concrete solutions for those that are interested in these solutions. Starting from this and based on this, we are currently establishing, actually we have already established and now are working on the first initiatives of this Polimi Design Think Tank. We are establishing the Polimi Design Think Tank. The Polimi Design Think Tank is a group of people created by our department and managed by our department, that aims at promoting design as a tool that we can use to transform the advanced research that we bring on within our department, most often in a collaborative way with other partners across Europe and the world, into innovation convergences for businesses and institutions. The tank has a multi-scale and multifocal approach. It aims at developing innovation trajectories and doing this through design practices and tools which are used as a strategic lever to support the orientation in today's complexity. We deal with many complex issues and problems. You know that the characteristic of these complex issues and problems is that it's very difficult when you get to a certain level of complexity to trace cause and effect relationships. So there is a matter of actually defining these trajectories in ways that are far from being simple. The more the situation is complex, the more it's difficult to trace these possible trajectories. We try to do this by introducing the design knowledge as a core ingredient, as a crucial element for providing information, for feeding strategic decisions towards innovation. The approach is then, and of course, cross-boundary. That means one of the possibilities that we have is that of putting together researchers, businesses, institutions, and other subjects that operate in different fields that deal with different kind of problems, and we can intersect them. That means we have the possibility of finding evidences, but also discussing evidences that come from quite different fields, and trying to capture the evolutionary dynamics in technology, in society, and in culture. I would say also in economics, even though this is not really the core of what we are doing. We try to establish a stronger, it's already strong for us, but a stronger link between academic research and business. We put users at the core of innovation, not only as the targets of innovation, but also as subjects that can take part into the innovation process. And we try to combine this qualitative approach with a more quantitative approach in which data can be used to drive or at least inform design. So we try to define the kind of reciprocal benefits of the academy and the businesses that take part in the initiative. As for the academy, of course, as a matter of making the kind of research that we perform more visible and to better diffuse it. There is the possibility of dealing with new research lines, and there are new forms of dissemination of what we do, closer to the needs of businesses and institutions we cooperate with. On the other hand, and looking at the side, they have the possibility of having new tailored products and services. They have the possibility of cooperating not only with us, but also getting in touch with others, so expanding their networks and horizons. And there is the possibility also through some of the activities that we organize through these new initiatives. Is the possibility of acquiring new competencies and internationalize their approach of these businesses and institutions. So what do we do at this design think tank? We create innovation convergences, and we develop, based on these innovation convergences, concrete solutions that aim at bridging research with the innovation needs of businesses and institutions. Basically, we have two products of this design think tank. One, which is now under development, is what we call innovation convergences. These are research, not only reports. It can also be reports, but it's more than just reports, because we use different ways of disseminating the results that are not only the traditional reports about innovation trajectories that we project ahead with a let's say 3 years distance. This is freely accessible knowledge, and based on this, and together with those businesses and institutions that took part also in the creation of the innovation convergences, or were audiences for these innovation convergences, on a customized, in a customized perspective and on payment, we develop what we call the innovation compass, that is shorter term trajectories for innovation that are turned into solutions in terms of prototypes that can provide an understanding of how the solution concretely works. So we go back to the initial scheme that I introduced, that is a mix of forecasting and backcasting. We develop these convergences as possible alternative futures. We start from there, looking back at the present, and we work on the development of the innovation compass for the specific needs of specific, let me call them clients. So we have the innovation convergence as an overall and open tool that will disseminate the knowledge produced by the design think tank, and we have the innovation compass as a specific set of initiatives that we conduct with specific subjects that are interested in working together with us for developing this innovation compass. One point of interest here is that we would like to do all this, both innovation convergence and work on innovation compass, possibly together with partner institutions across the world. And of course, we look at interest at this conference and the network that we established together as a way of starting a conversation about these intentions that we have. I'm finish with the presentation, as we are dealing with research, but also with education, I would like to point out, as a conclusion of this speech, that what we do is clearly aiming at a conversation with businesses and with institutions, but at the same time, that the way in which we relate to them is not only based on consultancy, but also based on the idea that we can transfer knowledge to them and let's say develop educational trajectories in a sense that are not aiming at students, but at organization, and that the transformation of organization typically occurs through the introduction of new knowledge. Thank you for listening to this presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Deserti, for your excellent speech. May I ask you some questions regarding your presentation?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to hear that you have been working on the design tank, trying to bridge the gap between the design research and the industry. So from the students, from research to actually influence industry. So I'm wondering, like, maybe one of the biggest challenges is for the industry is that how can they see the proof of concept when they receive this innovation compass, or when they see that the prototype that potentially pointing out to a very interesting direction, as it might take quite a while for that to actually being introduced to the market and to see the final result after that. So I'm wondering, what's the current experience from the experience from you on how to help them to not have this kind of question, and then to work on it together with the design tank. Thank you.
We have a variety of situations.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that we have, let's say, different relationship with different subjects. Overall, more recently, we try to establish long-term relationship with those subjects that are interesting for us and for which, of course, we are also interesting. When I say long-term relationship, I'm saying, let's say, quite relevant contracts that last for long, for which you establish some specific objectives, but objectives that are then specified along the way in specific subcontracts that we have with them. This is because, as you have mentioned, innovation may take time. So you start today, you develop the new solutions, then you have to test, hone them. If the solutions are based on really innovative technologies, but not only technologies, if they are innovative because they introduce something that is completely new, it may take quite a long time between ideation and real introduction of the solution in the market. So this is one way of dealing with the issue. Other possibilities are more tactical. So you start with smaller things to be done, and that are sometimes very concrete, and then go for these longer relationships. And one last thing is that it also depends on where you stop with providing your service to a client or to an external subject. I mean, sometimes they want a fully developed solution. Sometimes they just want to receive a trajectory or a conceptual idea that they can bring into their organization and further develop.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, as today's session is about future education, so which year of the students from your department could be able to join this research project? Like, do they need to be postgraduate students, or also from undergrad students they're started to work on this together?
Well, we work on this primarily in the master's programs, in the MAs.
I see.
And of course, as soon as we get to research, we can introduce postdoc researchers. In the MA, we inverted our cycle of studies because we now have first an initial part in which we aim at providing students with the technical knowledge on the development of new products or services. And then we have, let's say, the more strategic one, and those courses that look at more distant futures and are more based on developing scenarios and turn these scenarios into conceptual solutions come afterwards, which seems not that logical if you look at the rational development process for a solution. But in our view, it is rational if we look at education and providing students with knowledge and capacities, of course.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Deserti. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much for your sharing.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Ciao. 那我们导播的老师，我们可以切到我们下一位即将。
Let's shift to our next panelist.
Sorry, the guest need close the screen.
Professor Deserti, maybe you need to stop sharing the screen, so then they can share the next one. Thank you.
I'm trying.
No worries.
Yes, I made it.
Okay, thank you. It's working.
Have a nice day. Okay, 我们可以切一下下一位。
Let's shift to our next speaker.
下一位，我们下一位分享者呢是
Our next speaker is David Staley, Professor David Staley. He's Associate Professor of History at Ohio State University, a higher education strategist and designer. Let's welcome Professor David Staley to share with us on the topic of university design. Let's welcome.
Hello. 我们导播老师可以跟他联系一下，看看我们的。
Please contact the professor to see whether Professor Staley is online. So let's have a look at the shared screen.
Morning. Hello. How are you, Professor?
Very well, thank you.
Do you mind to turn on the camera? If it's convenient for you?
The camera?
Yeah, we couldn't see you. If it's convenient for you.
Oh, you know what? That is a hardware issue.
Oh. I see. No problem. We can see your PowerPoint now.
We good?
Great.
We all good?
Yes. Great. Nice to see you. Cool. Let's get started. Thank you.
Very good. Glad we got that technical hiccup taken care of. You think after 2 years on Zoom, this would flow more naturally?
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for the invitation, most certainly, and for arranging this conference, and especially this session. I would like to talk this evening, about university design, and as an approach, as a way of thinking about the future of higher education. And if I may, I'd like to start maybe with some definitions. And the first is what I mean by design. And certainly one definition of design means to give form. And so when we're talking about industrial design, that means to give form to objects, or visual communication means or graphic design means giving form to visual communication, or architecture and interior design means giving form to space or enclosure. I would like to talk about giving form to the university as something that needs forming. There's a lot of talk right now in many countries about university reform, or reform, we might say. And so again, I see this very much as a kind of design practice. I guess what I'm proposing this morning, and I'm interested in your reactions to this, I guess I'm proposing a new field or a new practice. And that's what I mean by university design, to give new form to the university. And what I'd like to do this morning is to imagine alternative future forms for the university. This is a quote from, I'm not going to read the whole quote. This is a quote from the philosopher of higher education, Ronald Barnett, who's made the argument that our ideas about new forms for the university, or reforming the university, are, in his words, impoverished, hopelessly impoverished, that we have a very, very small conception of what the future of the university can be, or what he says is a small range of forms. The idea being that the way we talk about reforming universities, or what future universities can look like, they all tend to look the same, or they all tend toward the same sort of form. And he advocates an expansive imagination about what universities can be. And so in my sense, the theory and practice of university design means imagining many novel forms of the university. The professor of international higher education, Simon Marginson, has coined this really interesting term, university making. And he means it, I think, in some ways to describe the activities of only a few university presidents or vice chancellors. But the idea is sort of creating new forms of the university, and to which I would also add remaking new forms of the university. What we're working with here, and the reason I can use the word design, is that the material that we are talking about, the material we are working with, is the organizational form of the university itself. So this is my sort of application of design, or design futures, design futures, to thinking about the form of the university itself. Now, I want to be clear before I go any further that what I'm not talking about is the physical form of the university. Many universities, of course, have strategic plans. Usually you hire an architecture firm to come in and sort of design or redesign a campus. That means the physical buildings, the green space, what does the interior of the building look like? And that's all fine, but that's not the kind of university design to which I'm referring here this morning. What I'm referring to is giving form to the configuration of knowledge that is a university, or visualizing the epistemological organization of the university, and ultimately, at the end of the day, imagining novel institutional forms, different forms from what we have today. If I may be permitted to plug my own book in this, a few years ago, I wrote Alternative Universities, Speculative Design for Innovation in Higher Education, which I am very pleased to say was translated into Chinese just in the last couple of months or so. So again, please let me put in that plug. And what I do in the book is I imagine 10 novel forms of the university. And I want to share some of these with you here this morning. Again, the forms, the designs I'm talking about are organization, the organization of the university. In other words, how knowledge is to be arranged or enacted or indeed experienced. And indeed, if we're going to reform higher education, if we're going to redesign higher education, I think the way to do that is to imagine new organizational forms. So again, if you'll permit me, I'd like to maybe lay out, not all 10, but at least some of the forms I describe in the book as a way to give you a sense of the kind of theory and practice I'm talking about. So the first of these I'm calling a micro college, which is really part of a larger system. So there are many micro colleges. Each micro college is made up of 1 professor and 20 students. We tend to think of that maybe as, well, that's a course. That would be the organizational unit. The college would be 1 professor and 20 students. In many ways, this form, and I'm going to point to some historical analogies here, I suppose, but one analogy would be to early American colleges, where there might have been just 1 professor, and that person was at once the president, the teacher, the instructional designer, the mentor to students. And again, we're going to see other instances of this. But a micro college would have activities in them that would include self-paced courses, technologically mediated self-paced courses, but also sort of Oxford-style tutorials. So a professor might work in various stages with 2 or 3 students together. There would be a weekly lecture or weekly convocation, I might call them, where the professor is speaking to the group of all 20 students. But I think that also would include peer-to-peer learning. So again, a very different way of organizing knowledge. It's not just simply the size of the institution, but the way in which knowledge is organized. One way of thinking about micro college might be to think of it as education at human scale. And maybe that becomes the tagline for it. In many ways, a micro college would reflect a decentered university. And so instead of a single university of tens of thousands of students, we decenter the university into many, many scores, hundreds, thousands of these micro colleges, which could be physically arrayed throughout a city, or indeed, as I try to suggest here in this schematic, maybe micro colleges are set up outside cities as well, on farms, say. Indeed, I think micro colleges could be established, well, in lots of places: farms, offices, cultural institutions, museums. The physical space, the physical location can be many and varied, to be sure. This is one schematic of how students and the professor might interact on any given day in one of these micro colleges. Or another way, maybe thinking of it, is how knowledge flows within this system. Here's maybe another way of thinking about this. So it's 1 professor speaking to the group of 20 students. And I find this, and in fact, the whole micro college idea, very reminiscent of a guru at his ashram. And again, there's a sort of an historical analogy here. Again, if this idea seems far-fetched, there actually is at least 1 college in the United States that's based on a model like this. Deep Springs College has been around for about 100 years. And it's actually 3 faculty and about 27 students. But again, it is a college on this sort of human scale. And again, there wouldn't be just simply 1 of these colleges. There would be many, many, many of these micro colleges in existence. So again, while certainly a micro college would have a physical form, the idea here is to describe the organizational or epistemological form of the university or the college. And I hope, as that example and other examples indicate, we're talking about radically new alternative forms that in some ways sort of live in a possible future, or as I think it was Alessandro who just said, an alternative present. So let me suggest another of these forms that I call polymath university. And there are a number of people today that say educating for a polymath is a fool's errand. That maybe at one time someone like Da Vinci could be a polymath, or in this country, Thomas Jefferson could be someone who literally had read every book that had been published. And then once there was this profusion of books in the 18th century, that it was no longer possible for one person to master all knowledge. And that's certainly one definition of a polymath. But I think that there's a modern definition that we can employ and indeed can create a university around it. And so at Polymath University, as a condition of graduation, every student majors in 3 very different disciplines. So students choose their majors from 3 areas: the professions, the sciences, and the social sciences, the arts and humanities. Choose one major from each of those. And so students would major in history and accounting and biology, or finance, or English and chemistry. And this gets students away from maybe thinking about a double major in, say, history and philosophy, or finance and business, what I call sort of these adjacent disciplines. The idea is to master disciplines that are at some epistemological distance from each other. One philosophy of such a university might be thinking simultaneously as an architect, a sociologist, and a poet, just to take one sort of example of this. The idea of Polymath University is that disciplines are idea spaces, not just simply a body of knowledge, but a discipline is as much a way of thinking. And the idea here would be to have students master 3 very different ways of thinking. One of the key features of Polymath University, I think, is this idea of cognitive toggling. In other words, the ability to shift between different habits of mind. So if I can sort of draw from my own example. So I'm tenured in history, but I also have an appointment in design. And on certainly this semester, I will toggle back and forth. In the morning, I'm teaching history classes. In the afternoon, I'm teaching design classes. And so I'm toggling back and forth between 2 very different disciplines. There's also something that we might call cognitive blending. That's to say, taking knowledge or taking skills from one domain and employing them in another domain. This is what this chart here on the right is suggesting. We can take ideas and knowledge from, say, the blue discipline and bring it over to the red discipline. And what new ideas, what new skills can emerge in that discipline. Another way of thinking of this maybe as a kind of cognitive collage, if you'd like another analogy to describe Polymath University. This is a very simple sort of mood board for the kind of student that I would imagine produced by such a university. And this is someone who is simultaneously a financial analyst and a chemist and a pianist at the same time, and is able to sort of shift and to blend between these 3 very, very different habits of mind, or these 3 very different idea spaces. Thinking simultaneously like this. And again, I want to sort of stress the idea here is that a student is not just laden with different bodies of information and knowledge, but really with the ability to think in multiple disciplines. In a way, it's almost like someone who's a polyglot, someone who speaks or thinks in several languages. This would be producing students who think in several disciplines at the same time. Just another way of thinking about a schematic for this. So each of the colored lines here represents an individual student's journey through these circles, which are disciplines. And so any student's journey would take them through multiple disciplines throughout their time at university. Or another way of thinking of this is here are individual students connecting widely different disciplines from each other, very disparate disciplines. And it's through that, I think, that one can develop the habits of mind of a polymath. So a third such form or alternative form of a university, I'm calling nomad university. And it's based on the idea that because work is no longer tied to location, the fact that we're able to conduct this conference so easily over like Zoom, for instance, similarly, Nomad University is nowhere and everywhere at the same time. The university is not rooted in place, symbolized by buildings that house chemistry labs or seminar rooms or lecture halls. The physical location is wherever learning is occurring. And that physical location shifts around the globe. So while Nomad University isn't physical, neither is it virtual as well. In some ways, the historical analogy to Nomad University might be the European Grand Tour, which aristocrats in the 19th century would take. They would tour Europe to ruins, to cultural places. The idea would be to travel throughout Europe as a way to learn. More recently, we might think about Nomad University as based on the gap year experience. Many students will take a gap year in between secondary schooling and before they go off to university, where they might go someplace in the world and engage in some sort of project. Nomad University, in a way, would be like a series of, say, 6 or 7 or 8 gap years, traveling around the world, engaging in projects in various locations. This would be as much an education in place or a learning in place. One would be learning skills where they were through the specific projects that they're engaged in, but because they'd be spending an appreciable amount of time in a location, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that, they're also learning intercultural negotiation. And that's what I see as one of the chief benefits of Nomad University. This is maybe sort of a schematic or a visual of what the sort of thing I'm talking about. There's no fixed physical location to Nomad University. These represent different student paths or journeys of the light blue student, the red student, the black student, traveling around the world. But neither is this a virtual experience either, and hence the word Nomad University. So 3 very different forms, as I say, 3 of the versions that I represent in my book. But again, not the physical form, but in many ways the conceptual form of the university. If we are talking about imagining the future of higher education, if we are talking about reforming higher education, to me that means imagining the university anew. And one of the things that means is that we do not have to mimic current institutional forms. We can use design thinking, we can use speculative design to imagine the university anew. And so for me, university design refers to reforming higher education through the theory and practice of design, through university design. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And I suppose I hope there's time for questions or comments or something like that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Staley. It's very inspiring to listen to your. I really like all of them. So from the first one, you're talking about education of human scale, which is really ideal. Like when we can have this less centralized to have the universities, and also the second one, the polymorph university. So what I'm curious about is that when we are thinking about for students to learn different disciplinaries, and so for your view and experience, do you think the length of education for university students need to be longer than normal 4 years if we started to apply university? In terms of the difficulties that they have to face. Maybe this is something more in detail about the strategy for your model.
You know, it's a fascinating question because I think as I was thinking through the different models, I didn't pay as much attention to time, the temporal dimensions of higher education. And you're right. We tend to think of higher education as a 3 or 4 year process. In the United States, students are staying maybe slightly longer, maybe 5 years or so. But why do we choose that time horizon? I mean, some of that is sort of historically grounded, I suppose. We could very easily design a university where the experience is intended to last maybe 10 years. Maybe not students are there full-time, maybe they're also engaged in other sort of professional work, but the idea of extending the temporal dimensions of universities is, I think, certainly one way we could reform or redesign higher education.
Mm-hmm. Because that's also a question that I'm facing these days when I teach here, because we are also trying to teach transdisciplinary innovation design. And so when we're thinking about to help students to have different abilities or different mindsets, it actually takes time for them to embed it with one and then trying to transform those. And so sometimes they will be concerned that, okay, maybe I didn't learn this thoroughly yet. So how long does it take for them to learn it thoroughly and then transfer to the next? So that's kind of the question we are facing as well.
Well, and the flip side of that is maybe a university experience could be shrunk down to a year or a year and a half to think in the opposite direction. I think that would be a challenge. But your question, I think, nevertheless gets us to think about, it challenges a lot of our assumptions about the temporal scale of a university education.
Yeah, and also when thinking about the last model you shared, Nomad University, it also made me think about, okay, so when we are forgetting about the location barrier, and then we're forgetting about the time barrier, so what kind of future education model could be? So it's very inspiring. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Staley. And then let's move to the next speaker, which is also the last speaker of today's session, I believe. 那么下面的话呢，让我们来邀请我们
Next, I would like to give the floor to our last keynote speaker. So please shift to the slide of our next speaker. Our next keynote speaker is from is Associate Professor at School of Design of Carnegie Mellon University. He is in charge of physical environment-related research and director of the Learning Environment Laboratory. Professor Peter Scupelli is going to share with us on the topic of design futures. How might we simply integrate futures into design education?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Great. Yeah, okay.
Excellent. It's wonderful to be here.
Lovely to meet you.
Let me try to share my screen. This is usually the most difficult part. Let's see.
Let's take time. Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Lotus.
Yes. Now can you see my slides?
It's not full screen. We can see your notes.
Okay. So let me see. How do I do this?
Maybe the one next to that. Maybe the button next to it.
Okay, let me try sharing again.
Okay. It's your desk.
There we go. New share. Let's share this. Okay, now if I hit play, now can you see my slides?
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
There is a little panel on the right side. There's a black panel which says no beauty effects.
Okay.
You can remove.
Let me see, where is
on the right side of the shared screen. From
yeah. Let me.
No worries.
Let me see.
We have time.
Yeah. Let me just move this over. Yeah. Hopefully this will do the trick.
Turn it off. No, it's still there.
Okay, let's see.
It's fine. So maybe we can remove it. On the right side, you can see there is a little panel. We can close it.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, great. Okay, then let's play. Great.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Let's get started. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think the first thing I need to say is I'm just so excited to be here and to participate in this conference. The talk that I'm giving is Futures in Design Education, and there's a question mark there. I think the subtitle is more about how futures methods can broadly fit into design education. If you've looked and heard the presentations, it's very clear that futures is being taught in design education. My talk is about how do we get deeper into that integration of design and futures in the curriculum. So I think one question might be why? Why should we do this? And I think the issue, and these are things that we've been seeing in the news, are the challenges of climate change is one example. And so our students and the next generation of designers are going to have to deal with the climate catastrophe that's unfolding. As we've heard from Professor Ashley Hall earlier, the tools that design students have might not be quite appropriate for the task at hand, so we need new tools and new methods to address these new kinds of challenges that designers are working on. The IPCC report on climate change sort of shows a direct connection between rapid decarbonization and the Sustainable Development Goals. And again, the Sustainable Development Goals are the kind of, or a new kind of design problem that our designers are currently working on. And this is really where I think you start to see the challenge between current design methods and design methods that are needed to address these long-term challenges. So in the case of the Sustainable Development Goals, the deadline is year 2030. And so the challenge is how might you design something now that gets us, starts to get us on the path towards those long-term Sustainable Development Goals. My talk has basically 4 parts to it. I'm going to start with talking a little bit about university futures. Then I'll talk about some of the movement that's been happening in design education, some of the debate. I feel like I would have to mention some of the alternative design education that's we've been witnessing around the world. And then I'll conclude with a case study of design futures spelt with an X, and I'll explain what that means later. So just a brief literature review, and this is just to expand on Professor David Staley's work, just to say that a lot has been written about the future of education, and I'll just mention a few of the books that have sort of informed my thinking about the future of the university. I think the first one to mention is the work of Sohail Nyatula and Jennifer Gidley, which spoke last weekend at this conference. And they talked about the university in transformation. And they give us a perspective, it's an edited book, and they give us sort of 4 perspectives. One is that of the Western universities. The second perspective is that of non-Western universities. And then they have a whole section that's on alternative universities. And the 4th section is about alternative paths to the future. Another book that's really informed my thinking about the future of the university was a work of Clayton Christensen, Curtis Johnson, and Mark Horn in their book, Disrupting Class. And this book came out in 2011, and they described how, from their perspective, universities were ripe for disruption due to technological advances of massive open online courses and the 2008 financial crisis. A third area of thought that's really got me thinking about the future of the university is the 5th wave, the evolution of American higher education by Michael Crow and William DeBars. So Michael Crow is the president of Arizona State University. And in these 2 books, they talk about how they are seeing this new kind of university emerging. And they call it the 5th wave university. And they say it's responsive to student needs, focused on access, broad access, deeply embedded within the local regions, and engaged in solving global problems. Their book is really on the future of one kind of university, so the 5th wave, but it's quite interesting to see the case study of Arizona State University. Then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Marie Conway, who also spoke at this conference last weekend, and her doctoral dissertation sort of describes 4 contested ideas and possible futures for universities. And so Conway argues that the 4 ideas coexist within universities. Each area alone limits views of possible futures. And an integrated perspective is needed to understand the connection between these ideas, and that integrating past, present, and futures requires a transformed discourse. So I think one of her main insights, or at least one of the main insights that I got from her work, was that universities that privilege only one of the 4 ideas risk being blindsided by societal and historic change. So then you heard from David Staley himself, and I'm not even going to try to summarize his work because I think he explained that excellently in the previous presentation. I will mention Academia Next by Brian Alexander. And this book really goes in depth into the uncertainties, challenges, and threats that colleges and universities face, such as finances, shifting student populations, and rapidly changing technologies. And in reading his book, I was really able to understand the future signs that he's seeing, and also what might be different visions of the future. And lastly, I'll mention Scott Galloway in his book, Post-Corona, because in it he has a chapter that addresses how after the corona pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, he sort of imagines that the role between universities and corporations might shift. And so that was kind of like an interesting scenario to think about. So with regards to design education, I think the first thing that I need to say is that much has been written about design education, and especially recently. So in 2020, Guillermina Noel edited a double issue of Shiji journal, and in it there is some incredible contributions of people from around the world that are thinking about what the future of the design education is. I'd argue that a lot of perspectives are not present in this double issue, and I would really like to see people from the design futures community and people from the global community adding to this conversation. I'll mention another paper that I read on the future of design education. And this is a paper by Sapna Singh, Nicole Lotz, and Liz Saunders. And what's intriguing about this paper is that they ran a workshop at the Design Research Society, the DRS conference in 2016, in which 4 scenarios for the future of design education were presented. And within the workshop, 40 educators were able to respond to the scenarios and elaborate on the future of education. And so I think having this feedback from a larger audience of on the visions and this engagement with people that end up then shaping design education is a really interesting contribution that this paper makes. The last thing that I'll mention is a paper that I wrote with Arnold Wasserman and Doris Wells-Papanek and Judy Brooks at the DMI conference. And in this paper, we were looking at what were some future signs that might give us clues about the future of design education. And the example that the case study that Arnold wrote about was looking at how education was changed in Singapore starting in the early 2000s to go from excellence in test taking to really be focused around creativity and innovation-driven education. Doris Wells-Papanek talked about design in K-12 schools. And I gave some updates based on my understanding of some shifts that were happening in design education within the university. So I think the next area I wanted to make sure to address were what's happening outside of the universities and outside of the schools of design. And so I think there's a series of questions that we could ask. The first is, where else is design being taught? And so we've seen an explosion of online, massive open courses, workshops, books, webinars, lifelong learning, you name it. And so some of the places might be, Studio H, for example, is design embedded directly into high school education. And so this has implications for, if something like this were to become more broad spread, it would have implications if students are learning design earlier than what should be taught at the university. Another example is Design for America. And so in this example, design is being taught to non-designers across the university campus. And so this is an example of how design education can be much more broadly to different disciplines. I think the work of IDEO.org is also interesting. They've democratized access to a lot of the things that one might learn in design education. So when I studied human-centered design, there were no textbooks. Now there's books, there's workshops, there's online courses that one can take. So that brings us to the next question of when is design taught? And I think this is Professor Staley sort of mentioned the temporal dimension of the future of design education. And so one example that I'd like to bring is the work of Design Learning Network. And here this is the work of Doris Wells-Papanek, and she's embedding design education in K-12 education. So working with educators before the university. Another example might be the Girls Garage. And again, this is an example of how a design can be taught as an after-school program and summer camps and workshops, and there's even corporate workshops. And the focus is really on reaching a population that sometimes does not go into design. Now, how is design education changing? I think all of us can agree that design education shifted dramatically from the traditional master apprentice studio-based education, where a lot of things are tacit and not explicitly articulated. In the current times, we're seeing that there's books, there's online courses, there's workshops that people can just drop into. This picture is from a workshop that I conducted at Tsinghua University, where I had the privilege of working with PhD students and design educators from around China. And so this is just yet another example of how access to design education is getting much larger. We've moved from design education being tacit to explicit. There's books that really talk about design pedagogy and so forth. There's also a lot of books and know-how that talks about learning. And so if you start to combine what we know about design education and what we know about learning science, I think we'll start to see new forms of design education emerging. So now I'm going to enter into the last part of the talk, having sort of set the stage for the changes that are happening at the university and what are the possibilities for the future of the university. What are some of the debates around design education, and then getting into where are other places where people are learning design and how might those shift design education. So the case study is about what I'm calling design futures. And I think one of the questions that students have had is sort of like, is design really about short-term or long-term? And I think this is really a false dichotomy because design, if we look at it historically and we look at it with the current challenges that we have, is about short-term and long-term time horizons. And it becomes really clear when we look at issues like sustainability and the sustainable development goals. And so with these types of goals, it becomes really clear that a designer is working in the short term on a specific goal, but what they're doing is part of a larger roadmap of initiatives and explorations that are trying to get us to the long-term goal. And so it's really important to make sure that while working on one goal, we're not undermining the other goals. And so earlier on in the presentation, I was talking about this link between the Sustainable Development Goals and carbon emissions. And so for designers that are working on Sustainable Development Goals, they need a new set of tools that will help them sort of anticipate how to design. I'd like to bring into the conversation some of the work of Stuart Brand. And so one of the ideas that I think really helps us to understand the need for designers to start thinking on multiple time horizons in more sophisticated ways is the base layering idea that he developed. And basically, just to summarize it really briefly, he argues that at these different levels, change happens at different speeds. So fashion is very fast, commerce is a little slower, infrastructure is slower yet, governance slower, culture is even slower to change, and nature is the slowest to change. Now this idea was developed before the e-commerce had emerged, and so we might have some issues with, as fashion and commerce sort of merged, and we're seeing like really rapid change. And so there are limitations to this idea, but I think the core of it is that change is happening at different speeds, and if we want to engage with problems such as climate change and the climate emergency, we have to think on short and long time horizons at the same time. So one of the, I think, risks is that as designers, we might just say, well, let's add some design thinking to this problem. But the issue is that if all you have is a hammer, then everything really looks like a nail. And while design thinking is an incredible tool, and it's very good for some problems, it also is problematic in other ways. And so I'll just mention a few of them. So typically design thinking focuses on problems now, whereas for some of the challenges that I was mentioning, such as climate change, rapid decarbonization, we need to align now with long-term goals. Design thinking tends to be human-centered, but the kinds of solutions that we need aren't just human-centered, they need to be planet-centered and focus on all forms of life. Design thinking typically tends to be customer-centric, so looking at the customer that you're designing for, not all humans. Whereas now we're seeing that for these larger societal problems, you really need to think about the whole community and the global community at that. Another limitation with design thinking is it tends to focus on profits now, like what can we do right now? But we need to think in a different paradigm, which is profits now that get us to sustainability. Another challenge that my students have and confusion is design really just about form and or social impact? Again, I think this is another false dichotomy because design is about form and social impact. So one of the activities that I did with my students was to get them to map where do they think their design practice is right now in 2021, and where do they think it will go in, say, year 2050 as their career unfolds. And so really interestingly, these are the post-it notes that they put. We see this shift from short-term form-based activity. Maybe this coincides with their first job outside of the, once they graduate, but then they see their careers unfolding and having a social impact and long-term. So much like Professor Staley was mentioning, the students are imagining that maybe they have less agency now, but throughout their career, they'll be able to integrate form with social. It's not one or the other, it's actually both and. Here are sort of my thoughts on if we were to use this gross simplification of design, what might be short-term and form-based is maybe the current versions of commercial design, social innovation, might be short-term and social focused. I think some interesting work is emerging from Jonathan Chapman, in which he's talking about emotionally durable design and meaningful stuff. And so I think he sort of points to a quadrant of that's form-based, but is really thinking long-term. And then I'll add, I think that the work of Terry Irwin and Gideon Kossoff with transition design now is kind of interesting in that it talks about societal level sustainability and thinking long-term. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals that I mentioned earlier, I think actually bridge social innovation and long-term thinking. What I'd argue that we really need is what I'm calling design futures, and I'll tell you about where the X comes from. And this is combining design thinking with futures thinking, and this allows you to connect sort of the short-term form-based with long-term social impact. The word design with an X was originated by Arnold Wasserman, and this is sort of his equation. So you take design thinking, you multiply it by futures thinking, and then you get design futures. Now, as is obvious, I'm just talking about the work that is being done at Carnegie Mellon in the School of Design. As you can see from all the logos here, there's many other places around the world where design futures are being explored. And so I'll give you sort of the perspective of what's happening at Carnegie Mellon from my view. And so design futures with an X sort of emerged in 2013 when Arnold Wasserman and I were collaborating, trying to teach this new course that would allow students to think about the future, a sustainable future. And we kept on talking about the new design and the old design. And at a certain point, Arnold just said, well, if it's a new kind of design, it should have a name. And then that's when he proposed the design with an X. And the X was to signify, solve for X. So it's an algebra equation. We don't quite know what design with an X is. Or Google X, they're exploring new kinds of design. edX, new forms of education. After the Design the Future course was developed, I developed a series of courses. So was that students could take these courses and then be able to finally get to Design the Future, which was a studio course. In 2016, the School of Design asked me to teach a futures class to the undergraduate students. So I'll be talking about that Design Futures course that I developed. But I think there's also a distinction that needs to be made. The first two courses were taught with more traditional design pedagogy, whereas the next two sets of courses were taught with a more experimental design pedagogy. And so I had a 15-week version of Design Futures, but I'll focus on the 7-week version of Design Futures, which in our curriculum is called Futures 1. And I'll say a little bit about the pedagogy. So I use the flipped classroom pedagogy, and this is because I have 40 students and 80 minutes twice a week. I can't teach it as a studio course. So there's online interactive homework and hands-on active work in the classroom. And this is sort of traditional flipped classroom. But since we're talking about design education, I added a third component, which is based on the work of Donald Shun, the reflective practitioner, which is reflection and discussion. So let me just give you a quick overview of what the course looks like. So first, students would do an online activity before they come to class. Then when they come to class, it's a workshop type activity. They work with small teams. And here you see some of the stuff that they were working on a whiteboard. So there's learning objectives. The first is to broaden the perspective from human-centered to future-centered. And I think there's two components to that. The first is to really consider the temporal dimension. And the third is to consider the values that are being embedded into design. The second is to learn to critique future visions. And designers really learn how to critique form and products and services. But this second goal is to give them the tools to critique visions of the future so as to generate new design opportunities and concepts. The second goal is to align design concepts to forces of change in future science. And so this is to notice what's happening in the world and extrapolate it into the future and make sure that their products or concepts can create synergies with forces of change and be propelled or pulled by such forces. The fourth goal is to analyze multiple design opportunities within alternative futures and layers of change. So again, one of the, I think, ideas from futures that is emphasized the most is the future's always multiple, and there's more than one possible future. And the fifth goal is to map design opportunities to 3 time horizons. And I think Professor Alessandro Deserti was talking about the different time horizons. So these are all the juniors, and I teach most of them with Adam Cohort. So we're co-teaching Design Futures 1 and Design Futures 2. And some of the questions that the students had for us were, what future methods are we learning to apply to design problems? And so we told them, we put this in the syllabus, there's 19 futures methods, and we gave them a table that sort of describes the future method and the design application. There's a lot of methods there. I'll give you examples of 5 future methods as they're being taught with one case study. And so we started out looking at Masdar City in the United Arab Emirates as a case study. Students watch a video about Masdar in the classroom. Then there's a little presentation that I give them, sort of summarize some of the key ideas that maybe weren't included in a video. And these are just images of Masdar City. Then we shift directly to the students working on teams together. And so they have a slide deck. The first step that they need to do is sort of decide how they're going to go about doing the research on Masdar City. Then the 3 team members sort of summarize the resources that they've explored. And then they come back together and they're using a STEEP framework to sort of try to understand what do they think is working in Masdar City and what are problems that they're seeing through the lens of STEEP for Masdar City. And then since in the classroom, I have communication designers, product designers, and environments designers. They sort of split off into their disciplines, and each one looks at the problems and opportunities for Masdar through the lens of their own interests and their own design practice. And so here, seeing the same, exploring completely different aspects of Masdar. So each week, then there's new content that's added. So the next is to learn about Jaime Cascio's critiques. So Cascio created a talk, and he really articulates like what are examples of bad futures and how can you avoid them. And so this is just to show you the extent of the online activity that students do to prepare for class. Then when they come back into class, we discuss the material and they start, so they're able to ask questions, they start working on it. There's slides that sort of help them understand the main ideas. Then we shift directly into the hands-on workshop part of the class. And what this allows us to do group and help students understand while during the workshop, because sometimes there's one question and the answer is something that groups provide more feedback while students are working on the project. So again, here we're seeing the problems, storyboards that the students envisioned in the previous week. And then they're applying 6 questions that Zhiyong Fu asks of visions of the future. And they're doing this within their group. So they're sort of helping each other look at their work through the eyes of Zhiyong Fu. These are the other 3 questions. And they're trying to understand, what does my concept do really well and where could it improve from Cassio's perspective? And then the students after class reflect on what insights do they have about how they might change their project. So then they come back to class the next day, and they sort of elaborate on what would a new version that incorporates Cassio's critique look like. And so here you're seeing their revised storyboards and explanation of the concepts. So that the next thing that they learn is how steep forces play out over time. And so for this activity, there's a documentary that talks about 2 American families from 1993 to 2013. And so students are able to see how these abstract ideas like social, technological, economic, environmental, and political forces play out and affect people in the real world through the story. And so they sort of see how these families were affected by those steep forces. And then they extrapolate into the future, and they create a 3-generation persona. And so persona family. So what they're trying to do, based on the examples that they saw in the documentary, is to sort of talk about the 3 generations and see how steep forces have a different impact on children as opposed to parents, as opposed to grandparents. And so the 3-generation persona and over time help to see how steep forces affect for their own family and parents, and try to understand how steep forces have affected their own family over time. And then and so that's what you're seeing here, how the steep forces affected their grandparents and parents in their own lives. Then they take the Masdar examples that they created, might respond to the ideas that they're creating for Masdar. And so the later, and it was quite a long homework, as you'll see on the right. So then when we came back into class, there's a mini lecture about alternative futures and talking about the 4 generic futures of Jim Dater. And specifically, this one paper written by Dater, Sweeney, Yi, and Rosa that links the steep forces to the 4 generic images of the future. And Dater's 4 generic images of the future basically say that there's 4 archetypal types of futures. One is growth, and that's the one we're most familiar with, and there's collapse, discipline, and transform. And what's interesting in this paper that they wrote is that they link the steep forces with the images of the future. And so this becomes a tool that allows the students to read Masdar and try to understand what kind of future is Masdar. And so they do that activity. And then each team is assigned to a different future. So in this case, I think the students thought that it was more of a discipline future. Then they're assigned to a collapse future. And they have to try to understand what changes would they have to make for Masdar to be a collapse future. And then they go back to their concepts, the concepts that they developed for Masdar, the way they revised them, and they start to explore their own images of the future, their concepts for the future, and they start to understand how would that future that was designed for a discipline future respond in a collapse future, for example. I've mentioned the 19 futures methods that are taught in Futures 1 and 2, and I've taken you through 5 of these and shown you how we've integrated these futures methods into designerly activities. I'll wrap it up with mentioning some of the questions that we got this semester as we're teaching the class. And so the first was, students thought that the table was great, but they wanted more detail. And so something that Adam and I are working on is creating a one-page description for each futures method with examples of design education. So I'll be presenting a paper on teaching causal layered analysis to design students. And so this is a 20-page paper at the ISDR conference in Hong Kong in December. And so my challenge and Adam's challenge is to create a one-pager that explains the method and provides case studies. And this is something that we're hoping to do for all of the case studies. Another question that we have had from students historically is what commercial products were developed with each futures method. We give them examples from the Index project, which is an international design award given to designs that improve life. These are examples from Index. And a lot of these examples from Index actually work on sustainable development goals. And so there's an online repository with lots of examples of design that is looking to make long-term change. Also mention the work of Bruce Mao with his Massive Change Network, his most recent book on 24 Principles for Designing Massive Change in Your Life and Work. Other questions that students have had for us is, how does what we are learning in Design Futures relate to my studio course? And so this is, I'm learning these interesting things in Futures, but I'm not quite sure how to apply it. And so one of the things that Adam and I have been doing is collaborating with studio instructors to try to find synergies between what they're learning in the Futures class and what they're doing in the studio. And one of our success stories is a collaboration with Eric Anderson, who teaches the 3rd year industrial design studio. And the first project that he gave was around steep plus V forces. And so that's the traditional steep plus values. And we brainstormed together how what he was doing in his studio course could reinforce some of the ideas that we were teaching in Futures. And I think much more work is needed for that. And so I'll just conclude with a summary. So we need to align short-term design action with long-term societal vision goals. University futures are plural and diverse, and we need to include that in our thinking. There's a lively discussion around futures for design education. Futures methods need to be adapted to design pedagogy. They can't just be dropped in. New methods that integrate futures methods into design practice are needed. And there's a deeper integration of futures method that's needed across the design curriculum. And so I think that's it. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter. Oh, we see David want to say hi. Hello, David. Do you have a question?
That was supposed to be applause. I just wanted to give fulsome applause for that keynote.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you so much for asking the questions to all of us about what the future and where and how and when, where and the design education gonna be. And then with your detailed example about your design future course, which is really inspiring. And thank you so much. And I'm wondering, may I ask you a question? Is that as you have been teaching design futures course for the past 5 years or even longer than that, and so what do you think, how does that apply to students who are not from design background? So I'm wondering, is there any people who are not from design background are joining your course? And how do you think about having people from different areas to work together with design students? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so much. So I think I teach an elective version of the Design Futures class, and that one's open to undergraduate students from anywhere on campus, master's students in design, and master's students around campus, also PhD students. And so I teach two versions of the same class. The one that I teach for undergraduates is all design students. And sometimes I'll let architecture students in or other design majors into that class. But the conversations are different because the class that I'm teaching that has master's students, MBA students, engineers, HCI students, and PhD students and undergraduate students, the discussions are very different. And then I really try to live into the, I think Herb Simon's definition of design, who is a designer is everybody that tries to create a current situation into a preferable situation. So in both courses I'm teaching to designers, it just happens to be with the undergraduate designers, they're learning to become professional designers, like communication designers, industrial designers, and environments designers. And the other one, the materials that they're shaping are different. And I think Professor Staley was talking about organizational design. So when I'm, the MBA students in the class are taking these ideas about futures in design and applying it to a completely different material. And I think I learned so much from teaching both classes. And a lot of the work that I've shown you is in progress. It changes every year, the more I learn about these problems. And I think the methods are also being developed as we go. There isn't an established canon. It's emergent and changing.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you very much for your inspiring speech. And I would also like to thank all of the speakers today. So today we had 6 speakers, and they have been discussing with us about their education practice and their methodologies on future of design. And so I'm very happy to moderate today's session, and thanks all of the speakers today. And also, I would like to thank the organizing team. Thank you so much for all the support all of you have supported to us. And so now I would like to switch to Ms. Chen Yu for the final events. I think you will host that for the
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shuxin.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Shuxin, and thank you all the speakers of the session Futures Design Education. Every speech was wonderful. Thank you again. Thank you, Shuxin. All right, let's move on to the next session. Is the events. Because the events will be for the Chinese audience, so I will change the language to the Chinese. And later we have the closing ceremony, so don't leave. And the first events is Futures Arts session. I will change the language.
First of all, the first event we're going to launch is called Futures Art Station. I'm the initiator, the founder of Future Art Station program. Here, I'd like to give you a brief introduction of this event. All right, so for Future Art Station is going to be launched. I'm going to introduce you this proposal. So this is a necessary and new dialogue oriented to the future. So this will be the first academic platform for design, art, science, and fictions. So here in this program, we'd like to talk about fiction, art, design, science, and the futurology, as well as We're going to invite screenwriters, the writers, authors, researchers, futurists from the science fiction area, as well as we're going to invite artists, critics, curators, scientists, and engineering theorists to participate in the discussion about the future art. So on this platform, we have academic consultants. We have 3 professors who are going to work as the academic consultants of this event. The first is Professor Fu Zhiyong from Academy of Arts and Design. He's also the director, the deputy director of the China-Italy Design Innovation Center of Tsinghua University, as well as the director for the Art and the Technology Innovation Base of Tsinghua University, and the Secretary General of the Interactive Design Committee of the China Industrial Design Association. And we have Professor Fei Jun, who is from the Chinese Academy of Fine Arts. He also dedicated to a lot of curation of art exhibitions. And we also have Professor Wu Yan. Professor Wu Yan is a very well-known science fiction writer with very excellent leadership. He has won a lot of, he's also one of the initiator of the Xingyun Award for Science Fictions in China. He is the former director of the Science Fiction Association in China. So the reason why we have invited these 3 experts to participate in our event is that we hope that we will have the professors from science, technology, art, design, and science fictions. So the founder of this event is me and Zheng Yiwen. And we are the co-founders of this program. We hope that we are going to start from this topic to initiate our multidimensional discussion. So in this context, we would like to make use of our imagination and the transfer skills to talk about art, design, science fiction, as well as technology, to talk about the multidisciplinary possibilities within these 4 disciplines. We're going to start many discussions around these disciplines, for example, art and the technology, digital art, digital exhibition, design fiction, speculative design, science art, and etc. This will be the emergent disciplines. We're going to center on those topics to talk about the multi-dimensional context. So we hope that we will start from science fiction, design, art, and the technology to define future arts, and through the multidisciplinary discussion, we would like to apply the future thinkings in practice, and we're going to integrate the curation, resources, academic resources, media resources, and we're going to invite the experts from the industry to talk about the ideas, and in this process, we're going to push this speculative design to a more academic level. And we're going to make use of exhibitions, discussions, as well as other events to drive more discussions. We hope that media arts can be a very important possibility for the commercialization, and so that we can participate in the curation, preparation of exhibitions, and to provide the future scenario planning for companies. And our events will have these webinar and offline salons, as well as our official exhibitions. We hope that we're going to start from the topic of the art and the design and the technology. We're going to publish papers, as well as to derive more discussions and the writings and the papers. We hope that we're going to publish literature. So we will have the topics like the future design technology, future design tools, paths of future design. Actually, in the afternoon, we have launched the manual for Design Future Toolkit. And we think that we are producing these outcomes one after another. And we would like to thank you for your watching about this launch of the Future's Art. And please stay tuned for our future events. Then next, I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Zhu Ling, who is the founder of the New Space Economy Workshop and the PhD candidate with the Academy of Arts and Design of Tsinghua University. And then I would like to give the floor to Madam Zhu Ling. Hello, Zhu Ling. Thank you very much, Madam Chen, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I am Zhu Ling. I'm a PhD student with the Academy of Arts and Design. I'm going to introduce you the information about New Space Economy Workshop. This is initiated by the Design Future Research Group of Tsinghua University. It is led and initiated by Professor Fu Zhiyong and me. So we will have the participants from also Politecnico di Milano. First of all, what is New space economy? The space economy is defined by ICDF as the full range of activities and the use of resources that create better benefits to human beings in the course of exploring, researching, understanding, managing, and utilizing space. It is developing very quickly and one of the drivers for the other developments. And for our research program is dedicated to develop the workshops and to encourage the participants to use their designs in the space area, as well as to encourage them to think about the new experiences in the space and to develop the involvement of communities and to collect the information, as well as we are going to make use of the vision planning, scenario building, prototype construction, reflection, transformation, and action, so that we are going to develop the solutions in the space. In 2021, we have started 3 workshops, and we will see that in each workshops, and the challenges are connected. We're not going to replicate the same model. We're going to make use of the resources to build the system. So, and the outcomes and the outputs will be provided to the participants of the next workshop. The first one is called the Tsinghua Global Summer School GSS 2021. So the topic is the atmosphere settled down, and we have the international new students from across the world to talk about how can we realize energy sufficiency. The second is Reactor International Arts and Design Workshop. And we make use of the platform to create something that we can explore and to interact in the space. The third one is this Tsinghua University Certificate Program. So the topic is How Are You in Mars? And the participants will make use of design to solve the pain points in the space on the Mars. And so the launch will be launched in Tsinghua University on the 18th of November. We are going to provide you with the detailed information on our official account. There is a video to introduce you the achievements that we have gained so far.
如果您想获取更多新太空经济相关的信息，可以关注明天下
So
午的
if you want to know more about our new space economy, so tomorrow afternoon we will also have our ideas, and also we will use the same platform. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. Can't waiting for the this further research. We would pay attention it if could continue pay attention to her project. Thank you. And I hold the screen. All right. All the speeches and the contents of the conference has been finished. Let's move on to the last part of the conference. There is a closing ceremony. You can open your camera if you want. Firstly, I will introduce the organization of the conference of the ICDF2021. There is a conference. This conference is hosted by Tsinghua University, co-hosted by School of Design, Carnegie Mellon University, and Politecnico di Milano Design Department, organized by Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University, and the China-Italy Design Innovation Hub, Tsinghua University. And our partners include the Center for Global Competence Development, Tsinghua University, Department of Information Art and Design, Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University, Art and Technology Innovation Base, Tsinghua University, and the Innovation Opportunity Education Alliance of China. And I would like to invite the academic chair of the ICDF. And first, I want to invite the Professor Fu Zhiyong. He is Associate Professor of Information Art and Design Department, Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University. Welcome, Professor Fu, doing the closing speech. Welcome. Hello, Professor Fu. You can open the camera.
Okay. Can you see me? Okay. Thanks all our participants. This conference. So firstly, I just reintroduce our conference committee. So the general chair is Professor Yang Bin. He's the vice president and the provost of Tsinghua University, and our executive chair is Professor Jinliang Li. He is the dean of China-Italy Design Innovation Hub. We have three academic chairs, which is Peter Scupelli from School of Design, Carnegie Mellon University, and Babla from Design Department of Politecnico di Milano, and also I'm another academic chair from Tsinghua University. So many thanks our panel chairs. Zhang Li, Liang Wen, Zhong Fang, and also Shuxin CHENG, which chair our different panel. And we have 4 ideas lab chairs, which conducted the Futures Art, Future Literacy, Future Symbiosis, new space economy, and Chen Yu, Xia Qing, Jiru Zhao, and also Julin. Yeah. Okay. So we have 11 keynote speakers, which include the Dean of our Academy, and also the Vice President from Tongji University, President, Vice President Yongqi Lo, and also the very important experts in the future area, and a lot of those renowned experts, journalists, to share their research and their thoughts in the future area. Inside our 4 panels, we invite many experts in futures philosophy, future design education, future society, and also futures creation to join this conference and share their cutting edge research and also the practice for us. Inside our ideas lab, we have many speakers which share their practice in empathy and symbiosis, new space economy, futures literacy, and future art, those different area. So we're still looking forward another 2 ideas lab tomorrow afternoon. Okay, just quick to like review last year's conference. It's the first year we organized the Data Future conference. We have 4 different themes: future theory, future exploration, future empowerment, and also future trends. So this year we have 4 new themes: future philosophy, future creation, future society, and the future design education. We also organized the paper presentation and a lot of events just released during the conference. Okay. So, so actually, I should thank all the our committee member who contribute their effort to organize this conference very successful. And I think in the post-pandemic era, future literacy and design foresight has become desirable qualities and capability for us to cope with uncertainty, enhance social and industry resilience, and achieve sustainable innovation. Today, experts and scholars from all over the world gathered online to share cutting-edge academic achievements and discuss crossover innovative practice, which is a very valuable and significant event in higher education circle for global sustainable development. It's hoped that this conference will attract more innovative power to join this cutting-edge field of design futures. So I would like to invite another academic chair, Peter Scupelli, to share his vision about this conference. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Fu. I'm just honored to be here and honored to work with you. I was thinking that we met in 2017 at the ISDR conference in Cincinnati. And back then, I don't think either one of us knew that we would be here today in this conference and with so much that's been accomplished. I think that the second ICDF conference was an incredible, as was the first one. then also Design Futures course has been translated into Chinese and posted online by Professor Liu on November 6th. These are all things that I think neither one of us could imagine, but we maybe dreamed of along the way. Also, the announcement of the Global Design Future Network is another dream that I think is coming to bear. And it was announced. I think this is an incredible platform to connect researchers, students, and professionals from around the world, and also transmit and collect the knowledge that is being created, and develop new kinds of design methods to engage with our collective challenges. I think the challenges that we've been talking about are ones that require collaboration and working together and learning from each other. And so creating such a network where all this learning can be shared and improved upon and shared again is really incredible. I think also that allowing for the courses to be shared is an incredible resource for everybody in the world that's interested in learning this emergent discipline. And I think the it's been a privilege to so many speakers, especially people that help us to think about the future and dream of new possible futures, but most importantly, to create these opportunities to create a community and to come together and learn from each other. I'm just really honored to be part of this community, and I think that there's incredible thing. Thank you for that, for everyone organize and makes things become possible. Future is already here. It's not evenly distributed. But I think that the work of the International Conference on Design Futures and the Global Design Futures Network will allow for this future to become shared more broadly and participated in more broadly. And so I think that the vision for the future is that we will, I don't know what the vision is, but I think that we're on track to creating new things that we can't even imagine right now. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, both academic chair, Professor Fu and Professor Peter. And thank you for your speech at the closing ceremony. Thank you. Okay. Here I would like to announce the successful conclusion of the ICDF 2021. And here is the number is we has broken through 210,000. Thank you all the audience to watching our conference, and thank you for coming. And thank you all the speakers of the conference, as well as thanks the ICDF 2021 committee, volunteers, all the members of our planning team. Thank you all for joining us to finish the conference. Thank you, all of you. And of course, our conference is continuous. And tomorrow we also have the paper presentation and the Ideas Lab speech. In the tomorrow morning, we will hold the conference where more than 20 young designer, scholar, PhD students will invite to share their topics at 9 a.m. in Beijing time. And in the afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, we have the 2 Ideas Lab they will be streamed on the same platform as this conference. So between the 1 to 3 p.m. and the 3 to 5 p.m. So, they will, we hope to foresight the future through design and make our future modern, valuable, and creative. So let's see you tomorrow and see you next year. Thank you for coming and thank you for watching. Thank you. If you want more information about the conference, please scan the QR code on the screen. Okay, see you. Okay, see you. Thank you. Thank you all of you. 等一下。